Chapter 2986. Now that the child is gone, is this marriage still valid? Of course, it's still valid. Mu Shumin exchanged pleasantries, but she was gnashing her teeth in anger. This Jiang Qiming actually knew how to negotiate with her. This woman had it all planned out. Wasn't she just worried that Mu Yanqing would go back on his word and refuse to marry her after losing the child? Mu Shumin was furious, but she could not make things too awkward in public. Moreover, on the way here, Mu Linfeng called and asked her to calm the emotions of Jiang Qiming and Xianxia. She did not understand why she always had to clean up such messes. When Jiang Qiming heard Mu Shumin's words, the uneasiness in her heart dissipated slightly. She was worried that Mu Yanqing would have a reason to call off this marriage if Xianxia's child was gone. However, the news had already been released and the invitations had been sent out. If they were to announce halfway through that the marriage was not going to happen, wouldn't it be a huge embarrassment for the Song family? She did not know how to explain this matter to Song Zhenghua. If he found out that the child was gone, wouldn't he blame her for not taking good care of his daughter? She would not be able to clear her name even if she jumped into the Yellow River. Mu Shumin sat in the ward for a while. After a while, she made a call and took the initiative to summon the hospital's director over, instructing him to take good care of Xianxia. This hospital was also one of the Mu Group's businesses, so the hospital naturally obeyed her instructions. After giving her instructions, Mu Shumin left the ward. Mu Yanqing and Meng Qingxue were still sitting at the door. Before she left, she glanced at Mu Yanqing and then at Meng Qingxue and said indifferently, "I think you're out of your mind. You caused such a thing for a little b*****. I'll give you time to weigh the pros and cons in your heart. Yanqing, the Mu Group doesn't need you. However, you're nothing without the Mu Group. You'd better cut ties with this little b**** as soon as possible." With that, Mu Shumin left without looking back. Meng Qingxue felt that all of these words were extremely harsh to her ears. This Mu Shumin was really too arrogant. What right did she have to insult her like this? Meng Qingxue looked at Mu Yanqing aggrievedly, only to see him sitting there with a pale face. His eyes were dark and gloomy, as if he was contemplating something or hesitating about something. She couldn't help but feel uneasy. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could do so, Mu Yanqing suddenly stood up with a livid expression and left in a hurry. Meng Qingxue couldn't care about anything else. She quickly stood up and chased after him. "Yanqing! Yanqing!" Mu Yanqing walked to the entrance of the hospital without a word. When he raised his head and saw the glaring sunlight, an inexplicable sense of humiliation rose in his heart. He suddenly clenched his fist and smashed it hard on the stone pillar at the entrance. His tightly clenched fist was instantly drenched in blood. Meng Qingxue chased after him. When she saw him repeatedly smashing his fist on the stone pillar, she rushed up in horror and hugged his arm. "Yanqing, what are you doing?" Mu Yanqing flung her hand away and walked to the side angrily with a sharp gaze. He hated himself for not fighting for it. When Mu Yazhe was still the CEO of the Mu Group, he was high and mighty and dazzling. Everyone was respectful and obedient to him without hesitation. What about him? Chapter 2987. On the surface, Mu Linfeng seemed to think highly of him, but in reality, he was just like a regent in ancient times. On the other hand, he was like a puppet emperor. On the surface, he could summon the wind and summon the rain, but he had no real power at all. Unfortunately, he could not leave the Mu Group. Mu Yanqing felt extremely vexed. In particular, Mu Shumin's reprimand earlier made him feel even worse. He was increasingly aware that he was being used. Ever since he took over, the Mu Group's economy had been constantly declining. If it were not for the support of the Mu Group's biggest industry, the medical industry, they would have been burdened with tens of billions of debt long ago. Mu Linfeng was mentally and physically exhausted because of the financial group's affairs, but when he wanted to intervene in the Mu Group's affairs, Mu Linfeng did not let him. He could only sit in the luxurious office that symbolized the highest authority, but he was essentially reduced to a vassal. It was not that he was not resigned, but there was nothing he could do. Even he himself felt that he was too useless. He felt that he did not have any dignity to speak of. Especially in front of Meng Qingxue, Mu Shumin ridiculed and mocked him, which made him feel even worse. Meng Qingxue walked to his side. When she touched his hand, Mu Yanqing sensitively let go of her hand and turned his face away. She was shocked. Yanqing, what's wrong? Nothing. Just now. She mustered up her courage and said, don't take what your aunt said to heart. He turned around and questioned her instead. How can I not take her words to heart? She meant that I'm a good-for-nothing and a puppet. If I don't obediently follow the family's arrangements, she's implying that I'll be expelled from the Mu family. After a pause, he laughed coldly. What does this mean? This means that I'll have nothing. Didn't I say that you won't have nothing? Meng Qingxue said anxiously, don't you still have me? Do you understand what kind of situation it will be to be expelled from the Mu family? Mu Yanqing moved closer to her and enunciated each word clearly. Qingxue, have you ever thought about how it feels to fall from a high place to the bottom of a valley? Meng Qingxue looked at him in a daze and shook her head. That's because you've never stood at the top. That's why you can say certain things so casually. Mu Yanqing paused for a moment before continuing. Falling from such a high place is more than just smashing one's bones into pieces. Everyone will laugh at you, ridicule you, and belittle you. Meng Qingxue was stunned, but she heard him say helplessly, I'm the CEO of Mu Group now. Yes, I don't care about such a status, but once I'm expelled from the Mu family, I'll have nothing. What did this mean? This means that I might not even be able to support myself. No matter how hard I try, I will never be able to catch up to Mu Yaja. People were different from each other in the first place. Some people were born as noble as the clouds, while others were born as lowly as mud. In the past, I was suppressed by him. Now, even if he has left the Mu family, he is still suppressing me. His eyes were filled with immense pain. Meng Qingxue felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She could deeply understand his pain. I can accompany you. No matter what, I'll be by your side. Let me think about it. Mu Yanqing said. Chapter 2988. I'm sorry, Qingxue. Let me be alone. With that, he walked away. Meng Qingxue stood there alone for a long time. After a while, a few bodyguards walked over and said to her, Miss Meng, President Mu wants us to send you back. The corners of her lips twitched violently, and then she smiled bitterly. Am I being sent to the cold palace? At the Gu residence. Chu Ho had been in a coma for 2 months. He had woken up a few times in the middle, but then he fell asleep again and never woke up again. Xiaobao didn't know that his mother, whom he missed dearly, was locked up in the Gu residence to recuperate. Uncle Fu coaxed him that he had found his mother, but he was disobedient, so his mother didn't want to see him. When he became obedient, his mother would come and find him. Uncle Fu could be said to be very experienced. These words were tried and true for children. With this trick, Uncle Fu had Xiaobao under his thumb. Xiaobao promised repeatedly that he would be obedient and wait for Chu Ho to come and find him. Gu Jinglian had used some unknown method to register him and put him under the Gu household register. Xiaobao had a new name because of this, Gu Qingzi. Gu Jinglian had despised the name Xiaobao more than once or twice. In order to come up with a name, Uncle Fu had gone through a lot of trouble. He had thought of hundreds of names that he disliked and sent them to Gu Jinglian for him to choose from. After picking and choosing, he finally chose this name, Gu Qingzi. When Gu Jinglian told Xiaobao this new name, Chu Xiaobao was very unhappy at first. She felt that Gu Qingzi's name was too lame and unpleasant to the ears. Xiaobao sounded better. More importantly, Xiaobao was already used to this name. His mother had always called him that. Hence, once the name was changed, Xiaobao was more or less not used to it. In the end, the father and son argued and came to an agreement. They would keep Xiaobao as his nickname and Gu Qingzi as his real name. Then, after Xiaobao had a new name, he went to kindergarten like other children of his age. Xiaobao was a little surprised. This was because he used to be envious of children of his age who could go to kindergarten and play with a group of children. But he didn't have a household register and couldn't go to school, so he could only peek outside the school. In such a big playground, the children played a lot of games. Some of them lined up to play eagle and chicken. Some of them surrounded a round black and white ball and kicked it around. Their mother said that it was a soccer ball. He wanted to play, but there was no one to play with him. This time, he could go to kindergarten. Little Treasure was extremely excited. However, on the first day of kindergarten, Xiaobao scared the little guys in the kindergarten. That morning, the teacher brought Xiaobao to the podium, followed by 2 fully armed bodyguards. They were all in black suits and wore sunglasses. Their expressions were cold, and their eyes were icy cold. They really scared the children in the class. When he came back, Xiaobao complained to Uncle Fu. Because of this, none of the children in the class were willing to play with him. That was because the 2 bodyguards that followed him around the clock were too terrifying. Xiaobao felt extremely wronged and could only sit alone in his seat. Uncle Fu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard that. He felt sorry and helpless. Chapter 2989. But there was nothing he could do about it. Over the years, the Gu family had made many enemies in the underworld. Their enemies were from both the underworld and the underworld. Furthermore, Xiaobao was the only son of the old master. He might even be the future successor of the Gu family. He had to be more or less tolerant. Otherwise, if anything were to happen to little young master, Gu Jinglian would be heartbroken if he were to die just like that after finally having a child of his own. Although Gu Jinglian didn't seem to care about Xiaobao on the surface, he was just a little arrogant and a little unreasonable. But what about deep down? The baby was very precious. Xiaobao had been in the Gu family for so many days and could be said to be able to call the wind and summon the rain. He could get whatever he wanted. Uncle Fu was still worried. What if Xiaobao was spoiled by old master this time? What should they do? However, Xiaobao was still in awe of Gu Jinglian. This little guy was very mischievous and wasn't afraid of anything except Gu Jinglian. Perhaps it was because Gu Jinglian had never been nice to him and always had a very cold expression on his face. In Xiaobao's words, he was like a ghost. When Uncle Fu heard this, he laughed out loud. Then he relayed Xiaobao's words to Gu Jinglian. The latter's face immediately darkened. You're saying that I'm like a ghost? Gu Jinglian clenched his fists tightly. His face was terrifyingly stern. Uncle Fu's shoulders shook because he was laughing secretly. He said, "This little guy is really smart. He actually dares to talk about old master like that. Don't let him be spoiled." Gu Jinglian said. Uncle Fu agreed on the surface, but in his heart he thought, when it comes to spoiling, old master, you're the one who spoils the most. Gu Jinglian asked again, "Is that woman awake yet?" Upon hearing this, Uncle Fu naturally knew who Gu Jinglian was referring to. Hence, he said, "She hasn't woken up yet." The doctor said that his vitality was greatly damaged, and the damage to his body was too severe. He needs a long time to recuperate. She has been in a coma for more than 2 months. Don't tell me he'll never wake up? Uncle Fu was silent for a long time. Suddenly he said, the doctor said that she had 4 gunshot wounds, 3 knife wounds, and a perforated lung. 2 of these injuries were critical, and her body was severely damaged. Suddenly, he said carefully, one of them was because of you. Gu Jinglian suddenly recalled that there was once an assassination attempt on him. Chu Ho had taken a bullet for him. Although it did not hurt his vitals, the wound had contracted pneumonia and he had almost died. He remembered that time. "Take me to her." Uncle Fu nodded. Gu Jinglian followed Uncle Fu into the room where Chu Ho was recuperating. Because she had not woken up for a long time, they had already changed rooms twice. However, the maids saw that she was well taken care of. Even though she had not woken up, her clothes were clean, and even her nails were neatly trimmed. Chu Ho lay quietly on the bed. There was no sign of life on her sickly pale face. If it were not for her heartbeat, no one would think that she was alive. After 2 months of recuperation and relying only on the nutrient solution to maintain her vital signs, she had obviously lost a lot of weight. She was so thin that her wrists were so thin that they could be held easily. Her oval-shaped face, which was originally the size of a palm, had become even thinner. With her black hair as a backdrop, her face looked even paler. Gu Jinglian walked to the bedside and stopped. He looked at her silently and frowned slightly. "Why are you so thin?" Chapter 2990. Uncle Fu explained. Old master, she hasn't eaten for more than 2 months. She has been relying on the nutrient solution to sustain herself. Gu Jinglian's expression changed slightly. I know. Suddenly he asked seriously, will she wake up? Of course she will. Oh, Gu Jinglian replied and smirked. I thought she was in a vegetative state. Uncle Fu broke out in a cold sweat. He had thought that Gu Jinglian had said that he wanted to see her because he was concerned about her. Who would have thought that this cold and heartless old master was here to see if she was dead? He didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this. As he thought of this, Uncle Fu asked carefully, if she wakes up, what does old master plan to do with her? If she wasn't Qingzi's biological mother, she wouldn't have survived until now. Gu Jinglian paused. When he thought of Gu Qingzi, his expression changed. In fact, if Chu Ho wasn't Xiaobao's mother, if he didn't have scruples about killing this woman, Chu Xiaobao would definitely be heartbroken. Moreover, a child at such a young age would definitely not be able to accept such a fact. If his personality changed drastically, the situation would be difficult to deal with. It was even harder to imagine how much the child would hate him if he knew the truth one day. He used to hate children, but perhaps it was because his blood flowed in this child's veins. Coupled with his mischievous nature, he added a lot of joy to his boring life, and brought a lot of laughter to the dull Gu family. Therefore, he decided to keep this child. As long as he doesn't cause any trouble for the child's custody, he can stay in the Gu family. Gu Jinglian paused and glanced at him. But, do you pity him? This girl is still so young. I heard that she was the second in command of the Interpol in her early years. Perhaps if we keep him in the Gu family and train him, he will be of some use. Gu Jinglian interrupted him and said, back then, she approached me under the orders of the organization to collect evidence on me. At that time I was too careless. Otherwise, I wouldn't have let her succeed. She betrayed me. Do you think I will keep a woman who is unfaithful to me by my side? Thus, for the sake of the child, let's not pursue the past. Uncle Fu advised earnestly. As I said, you can keep her. However, if she dares to play any tricks, I don't mind playing along. After that, Gu Jinglian turned around and left the room. Uncle Fu glanced at the person on the bed and immediately followed suit. After the door was closed, the eyelids of the person on the bed suddenly moved. His little finger twitched a few times, and his eyes suddenly opened. Chu Ho opened his eyes. After a long period of darkness, once he came into contact with light, he couldn't help but feel a little irritated. She immediately closed her eyes again, but Gu Jinglian's words still echoed in her ears. Gu Jinglian. She gritted her teeth as she silently muttered this name, her gaze suddenly becoming extremely sharp. The name Red Lotus was derived from the word lotus. He was a lotus. This was also the reason why Gu Jinglian had kept her by his side in the past. Gu Jinglian, this man. She had seen countless people, but she had never seen such a cold man before. Uncle Fu, Uncle Fu. A servant hurriedly found Uncle Fu. Uncle Fu saw that she was in a hurry, panting and gesticulating as if she wanted to express something. He frowned and asked, "What's the matter?" "Uncle Fu, she's awake." Chapter 2991. Who is it? Red Lotus. Uncle Fu's eyes lit up and he immediately went to the room. When he opened the door, he saw Chu Ho sitting quietly on the bed. The servant was trying to persuade her, but she treated her as air. She held onto the bedside table with a determined gaze. "What's the matter?" Uncle Fu walked over and looked at her. He then looked at the servant with a puzzled gaze. "Uncle Fu, she just woke up. The doctor told her not to move around, but she insisted on getting out of bed and walking around." Uncle Fu heard this and thought it was something serious. "She's been lying down for so long. She should walk around." The servant stopped talking. Uncle Fu walked over and smiled at her. "Miss, you're finally awake. You have to know that you have been lying in bed for 2 months." Red Lotus glanced at him and opened her mouth. Just as she was about to speak, Uncle Fu seemed to have guessed what she was going to say and immediately said, "Don't worry. I know what you're worried about. Xiao Bao is fine. He went to school and I'm afraid he's not back yet." "School?" She looked even more puzzled. "Xiao Bao has already been registered. He's starting kindergarten like the other children his age. Uncle Fu continued. This little guy was so happy when he heard that he could go to school. After all, children at this age are the most playful. How lonely would it be if he didn't have any friends? When Chu-ho heard this, her originally cold face softened a little. Her gaze was filled with gratitude as she softly said, "Thank you." She could tell that this Uncle Fu took good care of Xiaobao. More importantly, she didn't know if it was because of his age, but Uncle Fu gave off a very kind feeling. It was hard to imagine that he and that cold and cruel man had a master-servant relationship. As long as it was someone who was really good to Xiaobao, she would feel grateful. Chu-ho said, "I want to get out of bed and walk around." Because she had been lying down for so long and had not moved for such a long time, the function of her limbs had obviously deteriorated. She knew very well that she needed to undergo rehabilitation immediately. When Uncle Fu heard this, he immediately said, "Don't be in a hurry to get out of bed and walk around. You've just woken up and your body hasn't adapted yet. Besides, you haven't eaten for more than 2 months. Why don't you eat something first? Otherwise, if you insist on getting out of bed, I'm afraid you'll have low blood sugar." Chu-ho smiled gratefully. But only then did Uncle Fu smile with satisfaction. He turned his head and ordered, "Tell the kitchen to prepare some porridge and side dishes." All right. 10 minutes later, the servant brought in millet porridge and some delicious side dishes. Fearing that her stomach couldn't take it, she didn't eat anything for the time being. Instead, she prepared coarse grain porridge. Chu-ho was touched by Uncle Fu's attentiveness. Whether a person truly cared about someone could be seen from the details. Chu-ho picked up the chopsticks with trembling hands and clenched them tightly. He began to eat slowly. Uncle Fu looked at her and felt pity for her. He didn't know why, but this woman used to be enemies with the Gu family. But he didn't know why. Was it because she was Xiaobao's mother, and because he loved her he wanted to treat her well? Or was it because his heart ached for her? How could a woman get hurt in order to survive in this world? Especially when he saw her trying hard to hold the chopsticks and slowly swallow, this feeling of heartache became even more obvious. Is it hot? Chu-ho shook her head slowly. Uncle Fu smiled and sat by the bed. He chatted with her about Xiaobao's recent situation. Chapter 2992. As long as it was about Xiaobao, even if it was an interesting anecdote that happened while eating or sleeping, she didn't want to miss it. After she finished eating and put down her chopsticks, Chu-ho looked at him. She suddenly frowned and said, "Uncle Fu, if I recover, can I take Xiaobao away from here?" Uncle Fu heard this and was stunned for a long time. He asked her back, "Isn't it good to let Xiaobao stay in the Gu family?" Chu-ho's knuckles couldn't help but clench. She bit her lip and took a deep breath. "If it's that man, I don't want to." Uncle Fu didn't understand. Why? Because he's a Gu Jinglian. If she let Xiaobao stay in the Gu family, she was worried that when Xiaobao grew up, he would also become such a cold man. Uncle Fu heard this and said tactfully, "Chu-ho, you seem to have some misunderstanding about our old master." Misunderstanding? What misunderstanding? Old master is actually not that scary. Uncle Fu smiled and said, "Old master is actually a very gentle person." Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Uncle Fu frowned and walked to the door. A subordinate dressed in black stood at the door, his face covered in cold sweat. "Uncle Fu, what do we do?" "Something happened." "What happened?" Uncle Fu said impatiently, "Spit it out." "Is Dr. Cheng here?" Dr. Cheng was the Gu family's private doctor. Uncle Fu raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, "Why are you looking for Dr. Cheng?" "I accidentally spilled Old Master's tea and Old Master broke his leg. He wants Dr. Cheng to hurry over and take a look." Uncle Fu was speechless. This was indeed Old Master style. But wasn't this a little too fast? He had just finished speaking. Old Master, why are you so worrisome?" How was he supposed to smooth things over? He turned his head around awkwardly, only to see Chu-ho looking at him silently. Chu-ho's gaze was even more thoughtful. Uncle Fu immediately reprimanded, "Do you have to look for me for such a small matter? Don't you know how to call Dr. Cheng?" "I can't get through to Dr. Cheng's phone." "Then call his assistant." After being scolded like this, the subordinate immediately nodded. Uncle Fu closed the door and turned around. He smiled awkwardly and walked over to Chu Ho's bedside. However, he heard Chu Ho say, "A gentle person?" The new subordinate doesn't know how to do things. Uncle Fu wiped off his cold sweat. Suddenly, he straightened his face and said guiltily, "Master just has a bad temper." "Just a bad temper?" Chu Ho continued coldly, "If Xiaobao were to stay in the Gu family and be influenced by him, wouldn't he grow up to be as violent and cold-blooded as him?" Uncle Fu was speechless. "Xiaobao is a very kind child." Chu Ho continued, "If he were to stay in the Gu family and be influenced by others, he would definitely become an insensitive person when he grows up." Cold sweat trickled down Uncle Fu's back. "Miss, so what do you mean?" "I want to take Xiaobao away from here." "Old master won't agree." Chu Ho retorted, "Do I need to follow his opinion? Old master is also Xiaobao's biological father, isn't he?" Chu Ho was stunned. Chapter 2993. Chu Ho was secretly shocked. He likes Xiaobao? Unbelievable. She had always thought that this man was a cold-blooded man who didn't know what kinship was, what love was, and what father-son relationships were. Even if it was his own uncle or brother, he wouldn't show any mercy to them. As for Xiaobao, he was at most curious about him, but he would never develop feelings for him. So what if he had feelings for him? Did he know what responsibility was? Did he know how to be an excellent father? Perhaps, in his heart, there was only the so-called chivalry. She didn't want Xiaobao to become a cruel and numb person like Gu Jinglian. Uncle Fu saw that she was in a daze and said, "Old master has also said that you can leave, but you can't take Xiaobao with you. But if you want to stay, you can, but you can't take Xiaobao with you. Otherwise, old master will not show any mercy." He said that? Chu Ho was a little stunned. Uncle Fu said, "I'll give you some time to think about it. But don't make things difficult for me." With that, he turned around and prepared to leave. Uncle Fu had just walked to the door when Chu Ho suddenly said, "Can I see Xiaobao?" Uncle Fu turned around and glanced at her. "Of course, but not now." Chu Ho frowned. "But if Xiaobao sees you in this state, his heart will ache and he will be sad. Recover well. At least, don't let Xiaobao worry about you." Chu Ho reacted and nodded. Uncle Fu left the room. Chu Ho held onto the bedside table and was about to get off the bed. When the maid saw this, she immediately went forward to help her. She pushed her hand away and slowly raised her head. Expressionlessly, she said, "I can do it myself." But the servant was quite worried about her. "You've been lying down for so long, your legs must be very weak. If I don't support you a little, I'm afraid you'll fall, right? It would be bad if you reopen the wound on your back." "Chu," he said coldly, "I don't have the habit of asking others for help." Only then did the servant step aside. She held onto the bedside table and slowly stood up. However, the muscles in her legs seemed to be unable to exert any strength. It was as if they had gone numb. Chu Ho only felt a cramp in her leg. She hurriedly supported herself against the wall and slowly walked forward. She leaned against the wall and slowly moved to the window. She forcefully opened her eyes wide to welcome the sunlight outside the window. Even if she was stimulated to the point of tears, she would not close her eyes. He didn't know how long it had been since he saw the sun. When he woke up from his deep sleep, he felt as if a lifetime had passed. Outside the window, someone shouted, "Little young master, school is over." Chu Ho was slightly shocked and quickly looked through the window. Outside the window, in the courtyard, more than 20 of his subordinates suddenly stood in 2 straight rows, respectful and reverent. "Welcome back, little young master." Xiaobao carried his school bag and walked into the courtyard. He looked up and curiously looked at the 2 rows of subordinates who were welcoming him home. He seemed to be used to it and walked past them. When Chu Ho saw Xiaobai, her eyes finally regained focus. She stared at his back view as he walked towards the main hall. The little fellow was still so thin, but he did not look as dejected as she had imagined. Uncle Fu had taken good care of him. He had not suffered any grievances in the Gu family for so long. Chapter 2994. In the following week, Chu Ho worked hard on her rehabilitation. Her body was seriously damaged. Just as the doctor had said, when she was working for the Interpol, she was severely overdrawn and had suffered numerous internal injuries. In order to nourish her body, Uncle Fu followed the doctor's instructions and went to the pharmacy every day to get Chinese medicine for her to drink. Chinese medicine was very bitter. Chu Ho rarely came into contact with Chinese medicine, but she was anxious to recover, so she endured it no matter how bitter it was. The Gu family had their own Chinese medicine pharmacy and their own private doctors. Just the main house alone was equipped with 4 to 5 doctors. Gu Jinglian was a strong believer in Chinese medicine. Chu Ho understood this point very well. He used a brush and rice paper to write the movements. 3 of the doctors were Chinese medicine practitioners and 1 was a Western medicine practitioner. The main house of the Gu family still retained the appearance of the old house from 100 years ago. It had been renovated and designed with a beautiful Chinese courtyard, rockery, and flowing water. Everywhere one looked, it was filled with a classical charm. The Gu family had even specially hired a famous feng shui master to design the feng shui. The land that the Gu family originally occupied was famous for its feng shui treasures. Feng shui treasures were not to be underestimated, but it was very particular and required a lot of knowledge. The Gu family had the azure dragon at the back and the white tiger at the right. 1 dragon and 1 tiger dominated the entire house. There was a mountain of paintings in front and a famous hall in the middle. The tortuous rivers hid the wind and gathered the qi. It was rich and prosperous. The Gu family was spacious and could accommodate 10,000 horses. It could allow the future generations to have a bright future. The natural landscape and the flooring of the house could resist all disasters. The house would be prosperous and healthy. Such a treasured feng shui was coveted by many. In the capital, only the main houses of the Mu family and the Gu family were designed this way. Chu Ho originally thought that when she woke up, Gu Jinglian would definitely make things difficult for her. For 7 days, she did not see Gu Jinglian. Uncle Fu promised her that when she recovered, he would let her see Xiao Bao. Usually, he could only stand by the window and secretly watch her. She had no complaints and understood Uncle Fu's good intentions. After all, she was so weak now. It was inevitable that her child would be heartbroken if he saw her. Although Xiao Bao was young, she was very intelligent and knew how to be considerate. If he saw her sickly appearance, he would be worried. At first, she could only get out of bed and walk around the room, but her willpower was shockingly strong. An ordinary person with such a damaged body would definitely suffer a lot during the rehabilitation period. One had to know that the function of her legs had deteriorated severely. Once she walked, her muscles would twitch and cramp, making it difficult for her to stand firm. But she insisted on walking. When she was really tired, she rested for a while and then continued walking for another half an hour. By the 3rd day, she was able to walk in the back garden by herself. The doctor said that basking in the sun more could replenish calcium, which was good for the bones. Chu Ho engraved it in her heart. Once the sun rose, she walked around the courtyard. On the 6th day, she was actually able to run. Her astonishing recovery speed made Uncle Fu's eyes pop out of their sockets. Chu Ho silently thought that if she recovered as soon as possible, she would take Xiao Bao and leave the Gu family if she had the chance. However, at the same time, Gu Jinglian received an invitation from the Mu family. At night, he was reading in the study when Uncle Fu knocked on the door and entered. He asked softly, "Master, are you busy?" Chapter 2995. Uncle Fu replied, "It's a wedding invitation from the Mu family. Do you want to take a look?" Gu Jinglian finally looked up, and there was a slight change in his expression. "Wedding invitation?" Uncle Fu explained, "Yes. It's the wedding banquet of Mu Yanqing and Song Jinggua's daughter, Song Enya." Gu Jinglian put down his book and snorted. "They're getting married. Why would they send me an invitation?" Uncle Fu pondered for a moment and suddenly said, "Ever since Mu Yaja left the Mu group, the Mu family has suffered a great blow. Although Mu Yaja has become the head of the family, he hasn't brought any vitality to the Mu group compared to when he was still in power. He's just putting on a show when he's the head of the family. Who doesn't know who's in charge of the Mu group now?" Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows, appearing unmoved. "Oh," Uncle Fu continued, Mu Linfeng is still holding up the Mu Group now. Xingyu Financial Group is now eyeing you covetously. I think the Mu family sent you an invitation because they want to rope in the Gu family as their backer and establish some connections. I'm afraid this wedding invitation has the meaning of an olive branch. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "You don't have to show it to me." He might not be willing to accompany Mu Linfeng, that old fellow, even if he wanted to get close to him. The Muse and the Gus were not sworn enemies, but they had never been on good terms. There was no need for him to join in the fun. Uncle Fu nodded. Just as he was about to close the door, Xiao Bao's voice suddenly came from outside. "Uncle Fu!" He appeared out of nowhere and saw the red booklet in Uncle Fu's hand. He asked curiously, "Uncle Fu, what's that in your hand?" Uncle Fu smiled and immediately said, "This is a wedding invitation." "But, is someone getting married?" Chu Xiaobao immediately became excited. Back in Yen City, one of Chu Ho's colleagues had gotten married. She had also brought back such a wedding invitation and a box of wedding candies. She said that when people got married and had a good relationship with each other, they would send such wedding invitations and candies. If he went to the wedding banquet, he even received a red packet. Chu Xiaobao looked around him and asked curiously, "Uncle Fu, don't you have wedding candies? Or did I tell you to hide it?" Yes, I'll bring it to you later. Look at your greedy face." "Uncle Fu, are you going to the wedding banquet? Then, is it convenient for you to wear me?" How could Uncle Fu not know what he was thinking? He deliberately teased him. "Do you want to go to the wedding banquet with me and then receive red packets?" Chu Xiaobao was bashful for a moment. He nodded with a red face and emphasized, "In the past, when Mom brought me to a wedding banquet, I always got a red packet." Uncle Fu couldn't help but laugh at once. After all, the child was still immature. He didn't know that if the Gu family wanted to go to the wedding banquet, they would have to send a 7-figure sum. The red packet that he would receive would at most be a 4-figure sum. No matter how he looked at it, it was a losing deal. When Gu Jinglian heard Xiao Bao's voice, he looked up and called out, "Xianxia, come in." Xiao Bao didn't realize that Gu Jinglian was calling him. It was Uncle Fu who reminded him, "Xiao Bao, he's calling you." But Xiao Bao poked his little head in and saw Gu Jinglian looking at him and waving at him. Only then did he realize that Xianxia was calling him. He seemed to have not gotten used to this new name yet. He walked to Gu Jinglian's side. His little hand rested on the table as he looked at him eagerly. Gu Jinglian asked him, "Do you want to go?" Chapter 2996. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. "You want to go so badly?" Not really," he fiddled with his fingers and stammered for a while. Suddenly he showed a timid expression and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "Yes." He lowered his head and fiddled with his fingers. From Gu Jinglian's angle, he could only see his drooping eyelashes and his chubby cheeks. His adorable expression softened his heart. Gu Jinglian hugged him in his arms and reached out to stroke his little head. He gave a rare smile and said, "Okay, let's go together then." Then, Xiao Bao looked a little greedy. "Will there be red packets?" Gu Jinglian actually had the patience to answer his childish question seriously. "Yes, and I think there will be a lot." "Really?" Xiao Bao asked excitedly, "Can you give me all of it?" Gu Jinglian said matter-of-factly, "Of course." "But that's great." Xiao Bao was elated. In his heart, he was silently fantasizing about how many red packets he could receive. If there were a lot, he began to imagine how he would spend the money. If only there were 500 yuan. He was overjoyed at the thought of having 500 yuan. He had never seen so much money before. 500 yuan. Wow, he was rich. Fortunately, Gu Jinglian could not read minds. He only saw his elated expression and thought that he was looking forward to the banquet. He did not know that he was thinking about how to spend the 500 yuan. If Gu Jinglian knew what he was thinking, he would not know whether to laugh or cry. The Gu family had hundreds of millions of assets, mountains of gold, silver, and diamonds. This little guy was actually satisfied with just 500 yuan. However, Baby Chu was, after all, someone who had experienced the northwest wind. His concept of wealth was different from Gu Jinglian's, who was used to living a life of luxury since young. The banquet was held on the weekend at a 6-star hotel owned by Mu Group. That morning, Gu Jinglian woke up very early. Butler Fu ordered someone to push 2 rows of mobile clothes racks over. One row had large suits hanging on it, while the other row had smaller suits hanging on it. Gu Jinglian was very picky about what he wore. He first chose a suit for himself. As he was thin, he deliberately chose a double-breasted black suit. He looked imposing in it. He looked in the mirror and adjusted his appearance. Then he turned and walked to the other row of clothes racks to choose a suit for Xiaobao. As he picked, he asked, "Is he up yet?" "I've already sent someone to wake the young master up. After helping him wash his face and brush his teeth, I'll bring him here to change his clothes." "Oh." Gu Jinglian picked up a black suit and looked at it. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and turned to look at him. "What about that woman?" "Master, are you asking about Hong He?" "Of course. She's been doing rehabilitation recently. She's recovering very quickly." Gu Jinglian said, "Watch her carefully." "I understand." After a while, the servant carried the little guy over. Xiaobao was still sleeping. He was in a daze and looked like he was living in a dream. His eyes were not fully open. When they carried him to the bed, Xiaobao rubbed his eyes with both hands and looked like he was complaining. "I'm so sleepy." Chapter 2997. Xiaobao nodded, feeling wronged. Uncle Fu was amused by his charmingly naive look. He deliberately threatened, "Since you're not awake yet, why don't you sleep at home? We'll go to the wedding banquet and get the red packets." Xiaobao nodded in confusion and yawned sleepily. However, it was only a momentary daze. After a moment of reaction, he realized what Uncle Fu was talking about. His mind clanged as the golden abacus clicked a few times. His eyes suddenly widened and he said proudly, "No. The red packets are mine." As he said this, he nimbly got up from the bed, put his hands on his hips, and said arrogantly, "Uncle promised to take me there." Uncle Fu pretended to cry. I've always been so nice to you, calling you Uncle Fu. I dote on you so much, but now I just want a red packet from you. Why are you so stingy?" His pitiful look was very convincing. Seeing this, Xiaobao couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. He clenched his little fists as if weighing something. Finally, as if he had made a decision, he clenched his fists and said solemnly, "How about this?" Gu Jinglian turned to look at him. Uncle Fu was also waiting curiously to see what kind of constructive speech he was going to make. Xiaobao said painfully, "I'll give you some of the red packets." Gu Jinglian's face darkened, and Uncle Fu almost fell over. After waiting for such a long time and weighing the pros and cons, he was going to make such a speech? "How much is some?" Gu Jinglian asked curiously. "Yeah. If there's 100 yuan in the red packet, I'll give you 10 yuan. If there's 1,000 yuan, I'll give you 50 yuan. Uncle Fu counted with his fingers and muttered doubtfully, "Oh, this ratio doesn't seem right. 100 yuan for 10 yuan. No matter what, it was still 1/10, right? A 1,000 yuan for 50 yuan. That was too stingy. So 50 yuan was the maximum, right?" Fu Bo felt a sense of desolation. Xiaobao immediately defended himself and said, "If I had 2,000 yuan, I could have given you more." Stuff. Uncle Fu clutched his chest, looking very sad. "I didn't expect you to be so petty. All right. I won't tease you anymore." Uncle Fu rubbed his head and said, "Keep all the red packets you've received. Uncle Fu doesn't want a cent from you." Xiaobao smiled sweetly when he heard that no one would snatch the red packets from him. After Gu Jinglian picked out the clothes, Uncle Fu immediately helped Xiaobao change into a small suit. Gu Jinglian walked in front of the little guy and examined him. He felt that there was something missing. The tie was too mature. Uncle Fu immediately suggested, "Let's use a bow tie." He immediately found a new black bow tie and tied it for Xiaobao. "Does it look good?" Gu Jinglian took another look. Xiaobao was pinching the corner of his shirt uneasily and smiling slightly. His eyes were clear, his lips were red, and his teeth were white. He was wearing a white shirt with a small black suit and a pair of black gentleman's pants. He was extremely handsome. A certain picky man finally nodded in satisfaction. This guy had inherited his facial features. His looks were definitely outstanding. If he dressed up well, he would be a handsome little gentleman when he went out. When he grew up, he would definitely be a handsome young man. Gu Jinglian was very satisfied with his genes. Chapter 2998. When they got into the car, Gu Jinglian carried him to the child's seat. The little guy was very curious about this thing. He poked it with his finger and asked curiously, "This thing is installed in this car too?" This safety seat was installed at Uncle Fu's request by Gu Jinglian. The black Bentley Continental was Gu Jinglian's personal car. However, he heard from Uncle Fu that if Xiao Bao was sitting in the car, it would be best to install a safety seat for the child's safety. Gu Jinglian did not agree at the time. He only snorted coldly as if he did not agree. However, Uncle Fu carefully discovered that Gu Jinglian had someone install it the next day. He shook his head and sighed. This old master had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Although he seemed to dislike Xiao Bao and was cold on the surface, in reality he still cared about him. Gu Jinglian coldly poked his face and said, "Sit properly." As proud as he was, he would not say that he had specially installed it for Xiao Bao's safety. Xiao Bao sat down obediently and did not say anything. Gu Jinglian fastened the seatbelt for him. Along the way, Xiao Bao was in an especially good mood. He turned his head to look out of the window. His good mood was as clear as the weather outside the window. His two short legs kicked Gu Jinglian in a moment of carelessness. Gu Jinglian immediately hit him on the head and said, "Behave." Xiao Bao held his forehead in pain and looked at him pitifully. He complained, "Why are you so violent? Xiao Bao will become stupid if you hit Xiao Bao's head like that." Gu Jinglian replied coldly, "You're already so stupid. It doesn't matter if you're even more stupid." He was also a little suspicious. No matter how low his IQ was, it was still above average. How come his son didn't inherit his high IQ genes? According to Uncle Fu, when he was just in kindergarten, the teacher gave him a question. 1 apple plus 2 apples, and the little guy actually said that it was 0. When the teacher asked for the reason, the little guy actually said with conviction, "Because I ate them all." Isn't that equal to 0? Uncle Fu laughed at this joke for 5 days straight. Gu Jinglian was even more violent. He gave him 3 apples and forced him to eat them all. How could he eat 3 apples? After hugging and gnawing on it for a long time, she couldn't chew on it anymore. Gu Jinglian asked him, "How many apples is 1 apple plus 2 apples?" Xiao Bao counted with his fingers and looked at the remaining 1.5 apples on the table. He said aggrievedly, "There's still 1.5 left." Gu Jinglian was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. How could he be so stupid? Xiao Bao asked him matter-of-factly, "Since you know that I'm stupid, do you think I'm not stupid enough?" Gu Jinglian glared at him. "Even if I punch your head flat, you won't become any more stupid." Xiao Bao gulped nervously. He heard the hidden threat in his words and didn't dare to speak anymore. This uncle was so violent. He said that he would beat him up just because of a disagreement. The little guy mustered up his courage and said, "The TV is right. Being with a king is like being with a tiger." Gu Jinglian suddenly glared at him. Xiao Bao thought that he was going to hit him again and quickly covered his head. Because of his funny little action, Gu Jinglian broke his guard in a second and smirked. Chapter 2999. "Wow, Uncle, you're smiling. I realize that you look so handsome when you smile." Before he could finish speaking, Gu Jinglian found him too talkative and gave him another knock on the head. Xiao Bao cried out in pain and rubbed his forehead in grievance. He snorted and didn't want to talk to him anymore. Ignoring him, Gu Jinglian's ears fell silent. Along the way, he stared at the documents and dealt with the matters, while Xiao Bao quietly looked out of the window at the passing scenery with eyes full of curiosity. In the car, the radio was turned on, and the news was broadcasted. Today, the Mu Group CEO, Mu Yanqing, and Mayor Song Jinggua's daughter, Song Enya, will be held at the Mu Group's Grand Hotel. More than 100 media outlets will be present at the venue to follow and report on this high-profile wedding. The Mu and Song families were the 4 most prestigious families in the capital. This wedding could be said to be extremely grand. Xianxia woke up early in the morning to wash up and dress up. Naturally, the makeup team was in charge of her makeup. Makeup, styling, and wedding dress. After a busy morning, Xianxia put on her wedding dress and stood in front of the full-length mirror, silently examining herself. Some time ago, she had lost the fetus due to a miscarriage. As a result, her body was greatly damaged and she was very weak. Even though she had been applying facial masks for half a month, the makeup artist still applied 2 thick layers of foundation for her to make her look more radiant. However, no matter how exquisite the makeup was, it could not hide her dim eyes. Jiang Qiming walked to her side. Seeing that she was in low spirits, she rubbed her shoulders and comforted her. "Enya, today is your big day. Why do you look so gloomy and unhappy?" Xianxia's lips curled up, but she smiled reluctantly. "Why would I be? You look so stiff. Are you still thinking about the child?" As soon as Jiang Qiming finished speaking, Xianxia bit her lip hard, feeling somewhat indignant. She gritted her teeth and said, "How much have I sacrificed for this child? I didn't expect that Mu Yanqing to be so heartless as to destroy him." Jiang Qiming comforted her. "Even if the child is gone, there will be another one. Once you're officially married to Mu Yanqing, you'll be the Mu family's young mistress. Besides, it's fine if the child is gone. Don't think too much about it. In the future, as long as you can restrain a man's heart, there will be a second, a third." "Mom." The more she listened, the more upset she felt. "I'm starting to wonder if all this is what I want. Mu Yanqing's heart isn't with me at all. He couldn't even be bothered to brush me off. If it wasn't for his aunt who made the decision, he would definitely use this as an excuse to break off the marriage. You're going to marry him soon. Aren't these worries unnecessary?" Xianxia asked uneasily, "Can we really get married? Why do I feel so uneasy?" Jiang Qiming fumed. "Why do you always say such depressing things?" He was trying to destroy his own prestige. "This marriage must happen. Otherwise, all the hard work you've put in all this time will go down the drain." Clenching her fists tightly, she nodded with tears in her eyes. The wedding car was parked outside the Song family's villa. Chapter 3000. Mu Yanqing took the bouquet with a slight frown and a cold expression. He slowly made his way to the door and successfully completed the procedure. When he arrived at Xianxia's boudoir, he knocked on the door. Xianxia was sitting on the bed, her white wedding gown spread out like a sacred lily. She had her head lowered. Her head was covered by a veil that covered her face. She looked up and met his eyes through the thin veil. The two of them seemed to have something on their minds. He had married her because he was under orders. She, on the other hand, had no choice but to marry him. Their union was not based on any feelings at all. Therefore, unlike the sweet and romantic gazes of the bride at other weddings, the two of them looked at each other as if they were strangers. After going through the formalities, Mu Yanqing helped Xianxia into the wedding car. The two of them sat in the back seat, isolated from the hustle and bustle outside. Finally, Xianxia spoke in a low voice. "I thought that you wouldn't be attending today's wedding." Mu Yanqing remained silent. Xianxia glanced at him and sneered. "Mu Yanqing, you don't have to look at me like that. Do you think that I want to marry you? It's all because—" Mu Yanqing suddenly turned to look at her and asked meaningfully, "Do you think that it's a glorious thing for the bride to be abandoned on the road on her wedding day?" Xianxia widened her eyes. "How dare you? You want to throw me out of the car?" "Xianxia, do you know that I hate your despicable face the most when you get your way? I'm afraid of dirtying my hands if I throw you out of the car." Hearing his humiliation, Xianxia flew into a rage out of humiliation. She sneered and said, "Don't touch me after we get married if you dare." Mu Yanqing said contemptuously, "When I think of my wife having a test tube baby for another man, I feel as disgusted as swallowing 1,000 flies." Xianxia retorted, "What about you? Do you think you're any better? Mu Yanqing, you come from a noble family, but you're still guarding a high-class prostitute like she's a piece of precious jade." "A prostitute?" Mu Yanqing's gaze was dangerous. "Why, am I wrong? Isn't Meng Qingxue the same?" Xianxia said in disgust, "The entertainment industry is a big dye vat. Everyone says that those who come from the entertainment industry are very scheming and are high-class prostitutes. I think Meng Qingxue lives up to her reputation. What kind of tricks did she use to make you run around in circles? What's the difference between you and Mu Yaja? They were all blinded by that B***. But no matter what, your second brother is capable and capable. Even if he leaves the Mu group, he can still have his own world. What about you? You're just a pitiful puppet. Shut up. Xianxia, on the other hand, was in a fit of anger. How could she keep her mouth shut? She became even more insolent. Mu Yanqing, you're a good-for-nothing. You still want to compete with Mu Yaja? Even if you spend your entire life, you won't be able to compare to a single finger of his. Furious, the man reached out and grabbed her by the throat. Xianxia, don't think that I won't dare to do anything to you. Xianxia did not think much of it. She glared at him and said impudently, do it. Do it if you dare. I'm your wife. Strangle me if you dare. Let the world see how vicious and merciless you are. Chapter 3001. Mu Yanqing pushed her away abruptly and clenched his trembling fists. Suddenly, he chuckled and said, what about you? Aren't you a self-proclaimed socialite? For the sake of the man you love, you're so cheap that you don't hesitate to use your child to tie him up. You actually thought of using such a despicable method like IVF to conceive his child by hook or by crook. In the end, Mu Yaja doesn't care about your sincerity at all. You say that Yun Shirshir is lowly, but you can't even compare to a strand of her hair. In your eyes, Yun Shirshir is as lowly as mud, but in his eyes, she's a precious treasure. What about you? You're as lowly as dust, but you can't exchange it for a glance from him. Mu Yanqing. Xianxia's gaze was piercing. Stop talking. Why? Did I hurt you? Xianxia, recognize the truth. You're just a cheap broken shoe that no one wants. Yet you still think you're so superior. In fact, in the eyes of so many people, you're just a complete joke. Mu Yanqing's mouth was very venomous. Compared to Mu Yaja's refined and venomous tongue, his was one that did not choose his words carefully. Xianxia was beaten black and blue. She held back her tears, as if there was a fishbone in her throat that she could not swallow. Her lungs were filled with turbid air that she had nowhere to vent. Mu Yanqing could not be bothered to waste his breath on her. He only treated marrying her as a mission. When the car arrived at the entrance of the hotel, the car door opened and Mu Yanqing got out. He stood at the door and had no intention of helping her out. Xianxia had no choice but to lift her skirt and get out of the car. Just as they got out of the car, countless reporters raised their cameras and took photos of them. However, some discordant voices still fell into her ears. The eldest young master of the Mu family doesn't seem to care much about this delicate wife of his. Look at his cold face. He doesn't seem to want to talk to the bride. This newlywed couple doesn't seem to have a good relationship. The two of them should have no feelings for each other since it's a marriage alliance, right? The bride doesn't smile much and seems to be unwilling. Unwilling? What's there to be reluctant about? Although the Mu family was a fallen aristocratic family, they were still the #1 aristocratic family with 100 years of history. The Song family and the Mu family could be considered to be climbing up the social ladder, right? Xianxia should be grinning from ear to ear after marrying into a rich family. She's probably upset because Mu Yanqing neglected her. How shameful! I think the Song family is trying to curry favor with the Mu family to get this marriage. Xianxia's face turned even darker as she listened to those gossips, feeling even more vexed. Chairman Mu, there are so many media personnel here. Give the bride some face and help her up. Mu Yanqing retorted coldly, she doesn't have legs, can't she walk? The bride's wedding dress is so long. It's inconvenient to wear high heels. Only then did Mu Yanqing walk over to her side and reach out his hand expressionlessly. Xianxia reached out and grabbed his arm, her whole body stiffening. The wedding was a purely Western-style wedding. The hotel was renovated in the style of a church. Before the ceremony, the couple had to stand at the entrance to welcome the guests. Mu Linfeng was already at the venue. When he saw Mu Yanqing and Xianxia, his face darkened when he saw their mutual disgust. Chapter 3002. Mu Yanqing furrowed his brows while Xianxia, who was beside him, looked extremely embarrassed. Mu Linfeng said, "Enya, today is your big day. After today, you'll be the young mistress of the Mu family. The guests today are all business partners and celebrities who have frequent dealings with the Mu group. Don't embarrass me." Mu Yanqing nodded. "Understood, second uncle." Xianxia nodded with a faint smile. The two of them stood at the entrance. The man was tall and handsome while the woman was as charming as a flower. For the time being, they looked like a match made in heaven. The Mu group had put in a lot of effort into this wedding. Be it the setting or the details, it was as luxurious as a royal wedding. Coupled with the media's tracking, this was the best opportunity for the Mu group to showcase its financial prowess. After Mu Yaja left the Mu group, many people were waiting to see how the Mu group would fare. There were even financial media outlets that were criticizing the Mu group. Now, no one was optimistic about the Mu group after Mu Yaja's departure. Everyone in the Mu family was suppressing their anger, waiting for the day of the wedding to use the extravagance to vent their frustrations. Romantic music sounded at the venue. Mu Yanqing and Xianxia stood at the entrance to welcome the guests, while Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin stood beside Mu Yanqing. Song Jinghua and Jiang Qiming also arrived early to greet the guests. At this time, many guests had already entered the venue. Jiang Qiming smiled especially brightly. Her daughter had finally married into a rich family and had gotten what she wanted. Jiang Qiming had never had much status in the Song family. She could not compare to her elder sister, Jiang Yishan, for no other reason than that Jiang Yishan had married better than her. Although a beautiful woman had a short life, when she was still alive, she was definitely glorious with the title of the Mu family's young mistress. Just based on this, she was suppressed by Jiang Yishan. Things were different now, though. Now that Xianxia had married into the Mu family, her status in the Song family would be extraordinary. Therefore, she was smiling from ear to ear and was extremely pleased with herself. Many rich ladies who usually competed with her entered the venue and held her hand to exchange greetings. "Qiming, your daughter is getting prettier by the day. The Mu family is a big family. Now that Enya has married into the Mu family, you'll be able to enjoy life in the future." Jiang Qiming did not like what she heard at all. What did he mean by, "I can enjoy life"? Were they here to make fun of her? In the circle of noble women, there was always a strong tendency to compete. Jiang Qiming was no exception. Now that she could hold her head high, she naturally couldn't be bothered to bicker with these gossips. Xianxia had no choice but to force a smile on her face. Facing each guest, Mu Yanqing merely curled his lips into a faint smile. However, to outsiders, such behavior was more like the reserved, steady, and elegant behavior of a rich young master from a prestigious family. A subordinate walked up to Mu Linfeng and whispered, "Chairman Mu, the 5 safes used to store the gifts have been moved over." Because the guests at the wedding were either rich or respectable, the gifts were naturally very generous. The gifts were at least 100,000 yuan. For example, Gu Jinglian prepared a 1,000,000 yuan gift for the wedding. An ordinary bag would not be able to hold so many gifts. Therefore, 5 safety deposit boxes were needed. Mu Linfeng nodded and waved his hand. "Understood. You may leave." Chapter 3003. Gu Jinglian held Xiaobao's hand as they got out of the car. The little guy raised his head and his eyes widened the moment he saw the magnificent reception entrance. "Oh my God! It's so beautiful!" Gu Jinglian held his little hand and tugged at his tie slightly. He was not used to such an occasion. Unless he had a close relationship with the Gu family, he would rarely attend an appointment. He knew very well that the Mu group had sent him an invitation because the Xingyu financial group had been aggressively attacking them and making enemies everywhere. Naturally, the Mu group was eager to rope in an ally. Gu Jinglian was the most ambitious target of the Mu group. The Gu family was powerful. If they joined forces to deal with the Xingyu financial group, they would definitely have a chance of winning. No matter how powerful Mu Yaja was, he would not be able to withstand the combined forces of the Gus and the Muse. When the time came, Mu Yaja would be besieged on all sides, and Mu Linfeng would be most happy to see that happen. Therefore, Gu Jinglian saw through Mu Linfeng's ambition from the beginning and remained indifferent. However, Xiaobao looked interested, so Gu Jinglian went to the appointment. Xiaobao was full of novelty. The wedding scene in front of him was very different from what he had imagined. His impression of weddings was still the wedding of the daughter of the deputy chief of the police station in Yanqing County. However, Mu Yanqing and Song Enya's wedding was decorated like a palatial wedding. It was grand and magnificent. He had only seen such a luxurious scene in movies. Xiaobao said, "Oh my God! The bride and groom must be super rich." Gu Jinglian snorted disdainfully. In the past, the Mu family had Mu Yaja, so he did not make any comments. However, the current Mu group was just an empty shell of a wealthy family. He had seen the down-and-out aristocrats in England. Even if they were no longer rich, they still had to pay attention to appearances and ostentation. The current Mu group had a debt of billions. That old man, Mu Linfeng, was headstrong and self-opinionated. He was no longer in his glory. This wedding was more like a trade fair. Gu Jinglian held Xiaobao's hand and walked to the door. The reporters immediately noticed him. Gu Jinglian stood in the crowd. He was 189 meters tall and had an intimidating aura. He was dressed in a suit and wore a pair of sunglasses. His ink-black hair made his eyebrows look even sharper. All of a sudden, the media surged towards him excitedly. This was a rare occasion for Gu Jinglian to appear in public. In the past, he had always deliberately avoided the media and the public. Everyone in the capital knew about the rumors about the Gu family. They all knew that the head of the Gu family was a young, handsome, and ruthless man, but no one knew his true colors. Therefore, when Gu Jinglian appeared in front of everyone, the media was in an uproar. The crowd surrounded them like a tide. When Xiaobao saw this scene, he was really shocked. He thought that something had happened and instinctively hugged Gu Jinglian's thigh and the corner of his shirt. Gu Jinglian lowered his head to look at him, only to see him clinging to his side helplessly and hugging his thigh like a frightened little animal. An inexplicable feeling welled up in his heart. This feeling was too unfamiliar and difficult to describe with words. However, he actually liked this reaction of the little one. He bent down slightly and hugged Xiaobao in his arms, hinting at him with his eyes. Chapter 3004. Mr. Gu does not accept any form of interview. Thank you for your cooperation. Don't get too close. Please keep a distance of 3 meters. When Xiaobao saw the group of reporters shouting Gu Jinglian's name and looking menacing, he was so frightened that he asked Gu Jinglian, "Uncle, they seem to want to rush over and beat you up. Let's run." Beat him up? Gu Jinglian's face darkened. What exactly was stuffed in this little guy's head? Was it cotton? He wanted to cut it open to see clearly. This kid actually thought that this group of people rushed over to beat him up. Who was he? Who would dare to beat him up in the capital? "Do you have a death wish?" he said angrily. "Who dares to beat me up?" If anyone dared to touch a strand of his hair, he would cut off that person's hand. Why else would they all come for you? You're not a big star. Shut up. Gu Jinglian said, "Don't spout nonsense if you don't know anything." Xiaobao mumbled aggrievedly, "Uncle, you're too much. I'm so worried about you, and you're telling me to shut up. I'm just afraid that you'll be beaten to death outside because of your arrogance." Gu Jinglian. He resisted the urge to curse and walked to the door with a livid face. When Mu Linfeng saw him, he did not expect him to come. There was a look of surprise on his face, but when he saw his dark and cold expression, his heart skipped a beat and he looked a little embarrassed. He originally thought that Gu Jinglian would not come even if he had sent an invitation. He did not expect him to come with such a face. He even suspected that someone had angered him. Mu Linfeng immediately walked over with his cane and greeted him warmly, "Mr. Gu. Sorry for not coming out to meet you. Sorry for not coming out to meet you." Gu Jinglian curled his lips coldly and looked straight at him. Obviously, he did not take his hospitality seriously. Xiaobao looked around curiously, but his gaze landed on Song Enya. His heart seemed to be hit by something as his eyes stared blankly. Why did this woman feel so familiar? He seemed to have seen her somewhere before. He could not remember for a moment, but at first glance, she gave him a very disgusting feeling. Xianxia sensed a gaze on her. She followed the gaze and met Gu Qing's eyes. In an instant, her face turned pale with fright. Why is it him? Her memory wasn't bad. She recognized at a glance that this child was the child she had left in the warehouse that day. Seeing the child in a man's arms, she looked at the man curiously. Even though he was wearing sunglasses, she recognized him as the head of the Gu family, Gu Jinglian. It was rumored that he had ascended to the throne at a young age and had been in power for many years. The Gu clan was under his command, and they were insufferably arrogant. It was said that at that time, Gu Jinglian was the only person who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Mu Yaja. Then, what was the identity of the child in his arms? Could it be Gu Jinglian's son? But she had never heard of Gu Jinglian having a wife, let alone a son. The only thing she was sure of was that this child must have a close relationship with him. Otherwise, why would he lower himself to carry him in his arms? Seeing the child looking at her curiously, Xianxia lowered her head guiltily and subconsciously avoided his gaze. Xiao Bao became even more curious and stared at her suspiciously. His mind was in turmoil as he searched for memories of this face. Chapter 3005. Xiao Bao lay on his shoulder and continued to look in Xianxia's direction. Seeing that he was restless, Gu Jinglian slapped his butt. What are you looking at? That bride looks so familiar. I think I've seen her somewhere before. Gu Jinglian ignored him. Seeing Gu Jinglian carry the child away, Xianxia could not help but rejoice. It was said that this child had a bad memory. He had probably forgotten about her and what happened that day. After all, how old could a child remember anything? She was just scaring herself. Xianxia comforted herself. After all, when she found out that she had kidnapped the wrong person, she did not do anything to the child. She did not scold him or hit him. She only left him where he was. Wasn't this little brat fine now? She was still wondering how this child managed to escape from that barren area. She was only worried that this child would not recognize her. However, on second thought, so what if the truth was exposed? After today, she would be the young mistress of the Mu family. In addition, she was the mayor's daughter. No matter how powerful the Gu family was, could they still stir up trouble at the wedding? At the very least, they should give some face to the Mu and Song families and not pursue this matter. Moreover, at that time, she did not know that this child had anything to do with Gu Jinglian. Besides, children were very innocent. They would be over with a little coaxing. Hence, Xianxia did not take this matter to heart. The wedding officially began. 2 flower girls walked into the venue. One of the boys walked in front with a ring pillow in his hand, while the other little girl obediently held Xianxia's skirt. Xianxia held Mu Yanqing's hand and walked to the center of the stage. Then they stood facing each other. Baby Chu looked around curiously. Under the light, Xianxia's side profile came into view. His mind raced as he suddenly recalled something. Scenes flashed through his mind like a merry-go-round, and his face instantly turned gloomy. It's her. It's that woman from that day. In the center of the stage, Mu Yanqing looked at Xianxia's exquisitely made-up face. It was charming and moving, but Meng Qingshue's face suddenly flashed across his mind. Yanqing, you've always been my whole world. What about me? How much weight do I have in your heart? Yanqing, don't marry her, okay? Mu Yanqing, are you willing to have Miss Xianxia as your wife and enter into a marriage contract with her? In sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer, you will take care of her, love her, respect her, and be faithful to her until the end of your days? Mu Yanqing opened his mouth as he struggled internally. The words "I do" seemed to be stuck in his throat, and he did not reply for a long time. His mind was filled with Meng Qingshue's face, and his thoughts were in a mess. Xianxia could not help feeling nervous when he did not respond for a long time. Yanqing, at the side, Mu Shumin urged him anxiously. He was worried that he would cause trouble. Mu Yanqing came back to his senses abruptly. As if he had made up his mind, he said in a deep voice, "All right. I'm not willing." It's her. It's her. At the same time, the childish and angry voice of a child came from the guest area. She's that bad woman. Everyone raised their eyebrows. Chapter 3006. Gu Jinglian's face darkened slightly. Don't mess around. Xiao Bao did not care that all the guests present were looking at them curiously. Instead, he pointed at Xianxia angrily and said, "Uncle, do you remember what happened that night?" Gu Jinglian's eyes flickered slightly. Of course, he remembered. That night, he had a business deal in the suburbs and parted on bad terms. Before he left, he opened the car door and found the child curled up in the back seat. He was covered in dirt from head to toe and was carrying a small stray dog in his arms. However, in his eyes, such a disheveled child looked more like a stray dog. He did not hear the child talk about the cause of the incident himself, but Xiao Bao had told Uncle Fu before. Uncle Fu told him that the child was kidnapped to the capital by two strange men because even Xiao Bao himself did not know what was going on. He only knew that he was tied up in a warehouse, and then a woman he had never seen before walked into the warehouse. He did not know what she said to the two men, but after that, she left him alone in the warehouse, regardless of whether he was dead or alive. Xiao Bao only said that he heard the woman say that she had kidnapped the wrong person. Although he did not deliberately make things difficult for Uncle Fu, he felt indignant when he heard it. In such a desolate place, where there were few people, Xiao Bao was lucky to be able to come out unscathed. Think about it. If not for the coincidence that the chair had been soaked in the rain for many years and had corroded and dried up, what would have happened if he had not been smart enough to break free from the ropes and escape from the warehouse? There was nothing to eat or drink, and there was no rice or water. He was afraid that he would starve to death there. No one passed by that day and no one lived there. He did not have a phone on him and could not communicate with the outside world. There was no way for him to expect anyone to come to his rescue. But so what if he broke free? From there to where there were people, it was a full 10-kilometer drive. Even if it was a car, it would take an hour. However, a car was a car. For a child, a 10-kilometer drive was a straight path to death. Not to mention a 10-kilometer drive, he would not even be able to walk to the end of it. However, Xiao Bao was too young. He only remembered the woman's characteristics, but did not know her name or her identity. It was difficult to portray the woman's image with only a few adjectives. He had originally thought that this matter would be left unsettled. However, Xiao Bao claimed that Xianxia was that woman? Gu Jinglian was surprised. "Are you sure?" "Uncle, I won't forget her. It was this woman. Get someone to tie me up and bring me to the warehouse." Xiao Bao was so agitated that he was trembling all over. He stared straight at the side of Xianxia's face as she turned away guiltily. "She's that bad woman. I won't make a mistake." It was impossible for him to be mistaken. If it wasn't for her, I guess I would have been left in such a desolate place. You don't know, if I hadn't met Uncle, I would have starved to death there. At the mention of grievances, Xiao Bao's eyes turned red. His nose sniffled as if he was about to cry. Like an angered little beast, he stretched out his tender claws and teeth, itching to pounce on her. Gu Jinglian's eyes darkened slightly as his expression changed. Xianxia was the woman who kidnapped his son? Good, very good. Interesting. Gu Jinglian suddenly stood up, raised his leg, and kicked the table in front of him where the champagne tower was placed. Chapter 3007. The wine glasses stacked on top of each other fell to the ground and smashed into pieces. The floor was instantly in a mess. The sudden loud noise startled everyone present. They stood up one after another and looked in Gu Jinglian's direction in horror. They looked at the wreckage at his feet in fear and confusion. Xianxia was stunned by Gu Jinglian's shocking action. Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin also stood up at once. At the side, Song Zhenghua and Jiang Qiming heard the noise and looked in Gu Jinglian's direction. Their gazes fell on the champagne tower that he had kicked over. Only then did they understand where the huge commotion came from. Mu Linfeng hurriedly walked over with his cane and asked politely, "Master Gu, what's the matter? What happened?" Gu Jinglian did not look at him. Instead, he looked at Xianxia and said coldly, "Xianxia, you owe me an explanation." Xianxia was inexplicably flustered. She lowered her head guiltily and did not dare to make a sound. This child actually recognized her? How would she dare to make a sound when Gu Jinglian questioned her like this? Offending the Gu family was scarier than offending anyone else. Everyone knew Gu Jinglian's identity and the status of the Gu family in the capital. The current Gu family was no longer what it used to be. It was even more so that the Muse could not afford to offend them. If Gu Jinglian wanted to make things difficult for her, to put it bluntly, even the Muse would not be able to protect her. Xianxia trembled in fear. Not going to speak? Gu Jinglian's tone became increasingly displeased. I'll give you 3 seconds. I don't have much patience. 1. 2. Mu Yanqing was initially stunned. He did not know what had happened. Why did Gu Jinglian seem to want to cause trouble for no reason? The Muse and the Gus did not have any deep hatred for each other, so why did he want to cause trouble at the wedding? When he heard him mention Xianxia, he tugged at her arm and asked angrily, "Have you offended Gu Jinglian?" I don't know. Her mind was a jumbled mess, and she trembled with fear. Gu Jinglian hated it the most when he asked questions. He did not say a word. His patience was exhausted and he shouted coldly, "Speak!" Mu Linfeng immediately held his arm and tried to persuade him. "Master Gu, don't be angry. Let's talk this out." Scram! Gu Jinglian pushed him away roughly. Mu Linfeng was caught off guard and fell to the ground. Frightened, Mu Shumin hurriedly went forward to help him up, only to see Mu Linfeng's embarrassed and livid face. Mu Yanqing bellowed, "Gu Jinglian, this is the Mu family's territory. You have no right to behave atrociously here." "It's not my turn to behave atrociously?" Gu Jinglian sneered. "Do you think Mu Corporation is still the glorious Mu Corporation of the past? Stop putting on airs in front of me. Even if the person standing here today was Mu Yaja, I might not give him face." Oh my God! Shocking news. At Mu Yanqing's wedding, there was a dispute between the Gus and the Muse. At the side, a few media reporters swiftly recorded the scene with their cameras. Gu Jinglian glanced at the media from the corner of his eyes and sensed that someone was secretly taking pictures. His gaze was dangerous. The bodyguards standing beside Gu Jinglian also noticed the flashing lights. They immediately walked to the media and shouted, "Who was secretly taking pictures just now?" No one dared to respond. The bodyguards snorted and went forward to take away the cameras in the hands of the reporters one by one. Then they smashed them all on the ground. The media instantly let out a few exclamations. Chapter 3008. My camera. The bodyguard swept his gaze across the crowd, and the crowd fell silent. No one dared to speak. "You're not going to speak, are you?" Gu Jinglian saw Xianxia curled up in a corner of the stage. He nodded and said coldly, "I'm not going to get married." As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd whispered nervously. They did not know what Gu Jinglian was going to do. He said to the bodyguard standing at the side, "Clear the venue." The bodyguards immediately moved out and chased the media reporters out of the door. Then, more than 10 bodyguards rushed in from outside. They were all Gu Jinglian's personal subordinates. They rushed into the hall and walked up to Gu Jinglian. "Master Gu, what are your orders?" Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Smash it." The bodyguards immediately nodded. Then, they immediately spread out in the hall and kicked all the tables and chairs over. The interior of the auditorium was decorated magnificently, with many flower racks and romantic circular arches. However, Gu Jinglian's bodyguards did not show any mercy and smashed everything. The guests were frightened and left their seats to rush to the entrance. The crowd was like a tide as they exited the arena. Many guests were so scared that they did not dare to move. They curled up in a corner and trembled. No one had ever seen such a scene. The Mu family was a big family with a big business, yet someone dared to cause trouble here. However, knowing Gu Jinglian's way of dealing with people, they were not surprised. Thinking that the Mu family would definitely not end well for offending the Gu family, they only thought of how to escape unscathed and protect themselves. When Xiaobao saw this scene, he was so scared that he shrank behind Gu Jinglian, not daring to breathe. When Mu Linfeng saw this, he struggled to stand up with the help of Mu Shumin. He looked at Gu Jinglian and said bitterly, "Master Gu, what do you mean by this? Let's talk nicely. Today is Yanqing's wedding." But why are you so angry and want to cause trouble for the Mu family? Gu Jinglian glared at him. Shut up. If you say any more, I'll smash you together with dishing. Not long after, the originally magnificent wedding hall was reduced to a mess. Xianxia stared blankly at this ghastly scene, her heart in her throat. It was said that the Mu family had spent 300 million yuan on this wedding. Every piece of decoration in the venue was expensive. Just the flower arch alone was worth 200,000 yuan. The crystal goblet from the champagne tower was worth more than 100,000 yuan. Not to mention, the guests present were either rich or respectable. Some of them were even the leaders of the political world. Even the prime minister of other countries was present. Now that the wedding has been ruined like this, the Mu and Song families will only become laughingstocks. Jiang Qimeng was scared out of her wits by Gu Jinglian's subordinates. Each of them glared at her covetously. Tall and mighty, they walked over with a swift and fierce aura. With a casual lift of their hands, the stage was overturned. She fell to the ground in fright and was immediately helped up by Song Zhenghua. Shameful, utterly shameful. Song Zhenghua strode in front of Xianxia and questioned angrily, "What did you do to offend Gu Jinglians? Say something." "I really don't know anything." A few minutes later, everything in the venue was smashed into smithereens. More than 10 bodyguards returned to Gu Jinglian's side and waited for his orders. "Bring that woman here." Gu Jinglian ordered again. "Yes." Chapter 3009. The two bodyguards immediately walked up to Xianxia and grabbed her by the collar of her wedding gown. How would she dare to let them bring her to Gu Jinglian? She struggled with all her might. Jiang Qimeng and Song Zhenghua naturally would not sit back and do nothing. They stepped forward to help as well. Unfortunately, not to mention one Song Zhenghua, even 10 Song Zhenghuos would not be able to compete with these two strong bodyguards. In the midst of their struggle, a rip was heard. Xianxia's strapless mermaid wedding gown was torn apart by the bodyguards. With a whoosh, the wedding gown slid down her chest, exposing her naked body to everyone's eyes. The crowd was in an uproar. Xianxia was so frightened that she let out a hysterical scream. She covered her chest in shame, but no matter how hard she tried to cover it, the beautiful sight of her invisible bra could not be hidden and was exposed to everyone's eyes. The wedding gown was a one-piece, and when it slid to the ground, even her leggings were exposed. Xianxia's face was burning hot. She felt as if the world had turned upside down and the sky had turned dark. Jiang Qimeng was already scared out of her wits, and Song Zhenghua was even more flabbergasted. However, the two bodyguards still did not show any mercy. With the wedding gown torn, they each grabbed one of her arms and dragged her. Xianxia struggled and screamed, refusing to go with them no matter what. One of the bodyguards gave her a hard kick. It was Gu Jinglian's order to bring her over. She had no right to say no. They were just following orders. Xianxia struggled, but one of them grabbed her by the hair and dragged her mercilessly all the way. No, Xianxia was about to go crazy. She was naked, only wearing leggings and a strapless bra to cover her body. However, she could still imagine how the surrounding guests would look at her with contempt. She had a sense of shame, too. Being dragged naked on the ground in front of so many people, she was so ashamed that she wished she could die immediately. Everyone present could only hear her screaming at the top of her lungs. Xianxia was dragged along the floor by the bodyguard by her hair. Her head knocked against the legs of a table, causing her to feel dizzy. In addition, there were many broken corpses on the ground. Her skin was cut open, and her clothes did not cover her body. Immediately, she was covered in wounds and dripping with blood. By the time Xianxia was brought before Gu Jinglian, she was already in a mess. Gu Jinglian narrowed his eyes. He felt that such a woman was dirty even if he touched her. He asked Gu Qingzi, "Is it her?" Xiao Bao was dumbfounded and asked timidly, "Uncle, what are you doing?" He hated her, but he was also frightened by this battle. "Gu Qingzi, listen up. You're my son. No one has the right to hurt you." As Gu Jinglian spoke, he glanced at Xianxia coldly. "I won't let off anyone who dares to hurt you." Xiao Bao nodded in a daze. Uncle, I'm scared. Somehow, he felt that it was very cruel of him to do this. Gu Jinglian furrowed his brows. What are you scared of? The man squatted down and picked him up. Is this enough to scare you? Xiao Bao's good-looking brows furrowed slightly. Somewhat indignant, he puffed up his chest indignantly. I'm not scared. This bad woman deserves it. Gu Jinglian lowered his head and glanced at Xianxia, who was crying uncontrollably at his feet. His brows narrowed coldly. Chapter 30:10. Beat her up. Gu Jinglian cast her a sidelong glance. His nonchalant words sounded as if he were ordering his men to beat a dog. Hearing this, Xianxia could not help but curl up her body and retreat backward. She shook her head frantically and cried, Don't. Song Zhenghua reacted at once. Seeing his daughter being surrounded by the bodyguards, he rushed forward and stood in front of her to protect her. How impudent! Gu Jinglian, this is a public place, don't act recklessly. You're assaulting a defenseless woman. Are you even a man? Song Zhenghua's voice was thick with the accent of a bureaucrat. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows coldly and said expressionlessly, Song Zhenghua, don't put on airs in front of me. Get lost, or else I'll beat you up too. How dare you? Song Zhenghua naturally would not step aside. With a dignified look, he said, Who dares to act rashly with me here? His words could be said to be awe-inspiring and righteous, but he had misjudged something. It was useless to put on airs in front of Gu Jinglian. Who was Gu Jinglian? Who would threaten such an insufferably arrogant man? Gu Jinglian sneered and could not be bothered to waste his breath on him. He ordered, Beat him up together. As soon as he finished speaking, a few bodyguards immediately surrounded Song Zhenghua, grabbed him by the collar, and raised their hands to give him a hard punch. Song Zhenghua was completely stunned by this punch. The huge impact caused his whole brain to vibrate and buzz. Xianxia shrieked in fright, but in the next second, a slap came down on her face, causing her face to sway to the side. Bang! Bang! 4 to 5 bodyguards surrounded the father and daughter pair and greeted them with punch after punch. Jiang Qimeng let out a heart-wrenching scream at the sight of such a ghastly scene. She had never imagined that things would turn out like this. She scrambled over to Gu Jinglian and knelt in front of him with a plop. Grabbing the hem of his trousers tightly, she begged, Master Gu, let's talk things over. Stop hitting him. Stop fighting. Gu Jinglian kicked her away and said coldly, Get lost. One had to know that as a member of the Gu family, he had received martial arts training since he was young. With this kick, Jiang Qimeng rolled to the side like a rubber ball until she hit the wall and fell limply to the ground. The pain was so excruciating that her internal organs were about to be turned upside down. Mom, save me, save me, Xianxia's cries were still ringing in his ears. Jiang Qimeng refused to give up and crawled back to Gu Jinglian's side. She kept kowtowing and begging, President Gu, please spare my life. If they continued to fight like this, someone would die. Enya had just suffered a miscarriage a while ago, so her body was still very weak. If this goes on, I'll die. Sob, sob, sob. Stop hitting me. Stop fighting. I beg you, don't hit me anymore. Gu Jinglian remained indifferent and turned a blind eye to it, like a cold-blooded emperor. Xiao Bao hugged his shoulders and could not bear to watch this scene any longer. He suddenly looked deeply at Gu Jinglian. From his angle, he could only see the man's side profile. He was handsome, cold, and emotionless. However, even though he was young, he understood that this man was backing him up. Backing him up. This word was too unfamiliar. Chapter 30:11. Other than Chu Ho, no one would back him up. Today, however, he had a taste of being protected by someone. This man stood up for him and taught the bad woman who had bullied him a lesson. In his eyes, this man should be very bad. He was arrogant, cold-blooded, and sometimes very fierce to him. He would say things that made his heart skip a beat. However, it turned out that the feeling of having someone backing him up was so heartwarming. Xiao Bao's eyes could not help but moisten. He raised his hand and carefully rubbed his reddened eyes as he sniffled. Gu Jinglian could not help but turn his head, only to see him looking at him pitifully with reddened eyes, as if he had suffered a great grievance. The man could not help but feel even angrier. He thought that the young man was feeling wronged and could not vent the hatred in his heart. He turned his head and ordered, "Don't you have any strength in your hands? Give him a good beating." When the bodyguards heard this, they did not dare to delay and increased the strength in their hands. In just a short while, Song Jinggua's face was swollen like a pig's head. Song Enya was not any better. Her face was bruised and swollen, and she could not even cry. She was almost numb from the beating. Jiang Qiming cried until tears and snot streamed down her face. She kept kowtowing, but her forehead was swollen and bruised. Gu Jinglian did not even look at her and remained indifferent. She turned and crawled to Mu Linfeng's feet, begging again, "Second Master Mu, quickly think of something. If this goes on, Jinghua and Enya will be beaten to death." Mu Linfeng watched this scene from the beginning. His expression was anxious, but his heart was trembling. He looked at Gu Jinglian. Such a young man actually had such a cold heart. Rumor had it that Gu Jinglian was young and frivolous. He was ruthless and would do anything to achieve his goals. He once thought that this was probably an exaggeration. However, after witnessing it with his own eyes, this man's ruthlessness was far beyond his imagination. Mu Linfeng felt his hair stand on end and became even more wary of Gu Jinglian. However, even though he was old, his brain was still working. He finally realized who Gu Jinglian's anger was directed at. Song Enya must have offended him, so much so that he was willing to offend the muse to punish her harshly. How could he step forward for Song Enya at this point? Otherwise, if they offended Gu Jinglian at this critical juncture, the Mu group would be implicated and the Mu family would not have a good ending. How could Mu Linfeng be so stupid? He was very clear that at this time he naturally had to take a good stand. He absolutely could not interfere at such a critical moment and invite disaster upon himself. Qimeng, it's not like you don't know what kind of person Gu Jinglian is. In order to achieve his goals, he had always been unscrupulous. Why don't you ask your daughter how she offended the Gu family? Apologize properly. Jiang Qiming was even more confused as she cried, "I don't know either. The Song family and the Gu family have nothing to do with each other." Then why would the Gu family pick on you for no reason? Chapter 30:12. If I knew that your daughter had offended Gu Jinglian, Mu Linfeng sucked in a breath of cold air and said with a straight face, "No matter what, I won't agree to this marriage." Jiang Qiming was stunned and fell to the ground in despair. A bodyguard walked up to Gu Jinglian and asked cautiously, "Master Gu, she seems to be dying. Do you want to continue?" Gu Jinglian asked coldly, "She's not breathing anymore?" "Yes, she is, but she's already fainted." The crowd slowly dispersed. Gu Jinglian looked over and saw Song Jinghua kneeling on the ground. His face was bruised and swollen, and his body was on the verge of collapsing. It looked as if he would collapse in the next second and never wake up again. Song Enya, on the other hand, had completely fainted. Her face was covered in blood, and her body was covered in bruises. Her chest patch had also fallen to the ground. She was in a terrible state. The bodyguard kicked her face, but there was no reaction. Earlier, amidst the chaos, one of them casually picked up a bottle of champagne and smashed it hard on the back of Song Enya's head. She fainted at once, and no matter how they kicked and punched her, she did not make a move again. Someone went forward to check her breathing. It was weak, but there were still signs of life. However, she did not wake up no matter what. It was not that they were afraid of killing her, but at this time, they had to ask for Gu Jinglian's opinion. If he ordered them to continue beating her until she was out of breath, they would continue. Gu Jinglian frowned and walked to Song Enya's side. He kicked her with the tip of his foot, and someone immediately squatted down to wipe off the blood-stained tip of his shoe. "Master Gu, she's dirty. Don't dirty your shoes." Xiao Bao also saw Song Enya's miserable state. He was so frightened that he immediately hugged Gu Jinglian's shoulders. Such a little attachment stunned Gu Jinglian slightly, and the corners of his lips involuntarily curled up. He was unexpectedly satisfied with this little brat's dependence on him. She's not dead, is she?" Xiao Bao asked fearfully. Gu Jinglian was very confident. His men always knew what they were doing and would never kill anyone easily. Hence, he was certain that the Missy was still alive. Oh, stop fighting. Xiao Bao pursed his lips and couldn't bear it. She looks so pitiful. Gu Jinglian said coldly, this kind of person is not worth pitying. However, he didn't finish his sentence. The next sentence was, even if you die, it's not worth pitying. Xiao Bao, on the other hand, felt that it was too cruel. He had already vented his anger by beating her up like this. Initially, he hated and was angry with Xianxia, but after being taught a lesson by Gu Jinglian, he pitied the woman instead. After being beaten to such a state, it was unknown whether he was still alive or not. Uncle, let's go. Xiao Bao tugged at his collar and said pitifully, I don't like this place. All right. Let's go. Gu Jinglian carried Gu Qingze and was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something when he passed by Song Zhenghua. He turned around and glanced at Song Zhenghua, who had been beaten until he was delirious. With a look of disgust, he said, the Song family is one of the 4 prestigious families. However, from tomorrow onwards, the Song family will cease to exist. With that, he carried Gu Qingze and left without looking back. As soon as Gu Jinglian left with his men, the guests did not care about etiquette and small talk. When they saw the door open, they hurriedly left. Chapter 30:13. Sobbing, Jiang Qiming pounced on Xianxia and carefully hugged her. However, just as she hugged her shoulder, she heard the sound of bones breaking. She was so frightened that she froze and did not dare to act rashly. Where's the ambulance? Jiang Qiming broke down and howled, call the ambulance. Send her to the hospital quickly. Send her to the hospital quickly. Only then did Mu Yanqing react. Just as he was about to take out his phone to call the ambulance, Mu Linfeng stopped him in time. Second uncle, what's wrong? Don't interfere in this matter. Don't you think it's bad enough? Mu Linfeng said hatefully. If I had known that Xianxia had offended Gu Jinglian, I wouldn't have let you two get married. Don't you know that the Mu family can't compete with the Gu family now? That Gu Jinglian is vicious and merciless. If you send Xianxia to the Mu's hospital, given Gu Jinglian's character, he'll probably send people to smash the hospital the next day without a word. Mu Yanqing was shocked and put away his phone. Mu Shumin also had a lingering fear in her heart. Trembling with fear, she asked, second brother, look, this marriage, naturally it can't be. Mu Linfeng snorted. Yanqing and Enya haven't registered their marriage, so it's fine if they don't get married. However, after today's incident, the Muse have lost a lot of face. Those media reporters' cameras have been smashed by the Gus people. Mu Yanqing paused for a moment before saying, when the time comes, I'll send someone to inform them not to write about today's news article and pretend that this never happened. Do you think that the guests who came to the scene can't see? Mu Linfeng said angrily, when the time comes, one person will spread to 10, and 10 will spread to 100, where will the Mu's face be? Mu Shumin also looked embarrassed. He glared at Jiang Qiming angrily and scolded, you're such a troublemaker. When Jiang Qiming heard the scolding, she turned her head and glanced at Mu Shumin with despair and hatred in her eyes. Second Master Mu Shumin, our Enya has been beaten to such a state, and it's fine if you don't help her. Yet, he was still making sarcastic remarks. I can see that your ability to hit someone when they are down is not small. You're blaming the Mu family with just a few words. Mu Shumin flew into a rage out of humiliation. If it weren't for your daughter, would the Mu family be so disgraced? I've lived for so long, but I've never been so embarrassed. At the end of the day, isn't it your daughter who brought this upon herself? Why did he have to offend Gu Jinglian of all people? The Mu family hasn't even taken half a step into the Mu family's door, and they've already caused such a big trouble for us. How can they expect the Mu family and the Song family to advance and retreat together? Who is Gu Jinglian? We don't want to offend them. Now that the topic was out in the open, Jiang Qiming no longer held back and blurted out, what do you mean by not wanting to offend him? I think you guys just don't dare to offend him. It really proved that statement. Without Mu Yaja, the Mu group is no longer the glorious Mu group of the past. Look at the Mu group now. They have to speak humbly in front of the Gu family. How embarrassing. Mu Shumin wanted to say something, but Mu Linfeng immediately stopped her and reprimanded, "At this point, what else is there to say?" Second brother. Chapter 30:14. Mu Shumin could not quell the hatred in his heart, but due to Mu Linfeng's words, he could only glare hatefully at Jiang Qiming. The two families had fallen out just like that. Naturally, Jiang Qiming did not intend to have any interaction with the Mu family. She was also clear that because of this accident, the marriage between the Muse and the Songs was probably off. Therefore, with the mentality of, if you don't let me have a good time, I won't let you have a good time either, she naturally did not hold back when she spoke. There's nothing much to say. This Mu family is no longer the Mu family of the past. At least, when Yaja was around, Gu Jinglian wouldn't bully us like this. If Gu Jinglian wanted to flare up, he would have to take Yaja's face into consideration. But now that Xianxia is no longer around, this Mu family used to be a lion. Now, it's more like a down-and-out lion king that has been chased out of its tribe. How dare it still want to claim its territory as the king? Forget it. Let's think about how to clean up the mess we've created first. Jiang Qiming seemed to only be satisfied after shouting these words at the top of her lungs. Little did she know that when Mu Linfeng heard this, he felt a lot of emotions. His blood rushed to his heart and his body swayed a little. These words, however, pierced into the bottom of his heart. These days, there were many people who spoke ill of the Mu family. Jiang Qiming's words were undoubtedly a critical hit. Mu Yanqing hurriedly held him. Seeing his uncle's ugly expression, he was even more furious. He shouted at Jiang Qiming, "Do you think the Song family is any better?" "Jiang Qiming, don't be so shameless. Gu Jinglian said that the Song family will become a thing of the past tomorrow. You should think about how you're going to live your life." With that, he supported Mu Linfeng and left. Mu Shumin also left with his men. The venue was empty in an instant. Jiang Qiming felt aggrieved, but now that the situation was critical, she could not be bothered to be angry at Mu Yanqing's words. She hurriedly made a call. Half an hour later, the ambulance rushed over and carried everyone into the vehicle. Along the way, the medical staff checked on Xianxia and Song Jinggua's injuries. Although their injuries were serious, fortunately, their vital signs were stable. Jiang Qiming was so worried that it was as if the sky was about to collapse. She was in utter despair. If something were to happen to Song Jinggua, she wouldn't know what to do. They were worried that Xianxia, who had just suffered a miscarriage, would not be able to take it. Fortunately, the medical staff said that her life was not in danger, and they could only confirm it after a series of tests. Her heart was in a state of disarray again. The two were sent to the hospital. Song Jinggua and Xianxia were sent to the emergency room one after another, leaving Jiang Qiming waiting outside the operating theater. She didn't have any cash on her, but the moment she entered the hospital and revealed her identity, the hospital immediately said that they would do their best to save her. Jiang Qiming made a few calls to the Song family's main house. Not long after, Song Jianjun rushed over with his men. At this time, Song Jinggua had already been pushed out of the operating room and transferred to the intensive care unit. Song Jianjun looked at his brother's appearance. The doctor told him that there were no other injuries, just a severe concussion and a few broken bones in his body. There was no danger to his life. However, at Song Jinggua's age, the injuries to his muscles and bones would probably take a long time to recover. Chapter 30:15. Worried that something had happened to him, she was so frightened that tears fell from her eyes as she looked at Song Jinggua, who was lying on the bed on the verge of death. Song Jianjun asked angrily, "Qiming, don't just cry. Why don't you at least tell me what's going on?" Today was Song Enya's wedding, so Song Jianjun was in the June district. He was not present and only sent a red packet because he did not know what had happened. Jiang Qiming immediately told him everything. When Song Jianjun heard that it was Gu Jinglian who had beaten someone up to this state, he was even more shocked. "How did you offend someone like Gu Jinglian?" Song Jianjun had a deep memory of Gu Jinglian's name. It was not for any other reason but because Gu Jinglian was probably the first person in history to have led a group of people to smash up the June district's courtyard. Back then, a certain second-generation heir from the June district's courtyard had somehow run over to the Gu family's gambling den to gamble and ended up with a huge debt. However, this fellow was probably full of himself and did not think much of the Gu family because of his background. At that time, the Gu family had a change of dynasty, and Gu Jinglian had just ascended to the throne. He thought that even if he offended this inexperienced calf, it wouldn't cause much of a stir. However, this fellow did not gloat for long. The next day, Gu Jinglian sent people with dozens of men to smash his house's courtyard into smithereens. Gu Jinglian's methods were surprisingly ruthless. Apart from the living, everything that could be formed in the house was smashed. He threatened to break his limbs if he did not return the money within 3 days. That young master was finally scared out of his wits. He scraped together the money and returned it. The Gu family sent word that he had only returned the principal and had not paid off the interest. A few years had passed since the incident, but this pitiful young master was still gritting his teeth to repay the interest. This loan shark's interest had accumulated from millions to tens of millions, and then to hundreds of millions. No matter what, after rounding it up, he still owed a few million. Therefore, Gu Jinglian's name left a deep impression on Song Jianjun. He could not help but be on tenterhooks. He discussed with his wife whether they should send Song Zhenghua and Song Enya overseas for medical treatment. Jiang Qiming, however, refused. Song Zhenghua was a mayor, after all. No matter how arrogant the Gu family was, they would not be so arrogant, right? Sending them overseas for medical treatment, in the eyes of outsiders, was no different from a stray dog. The Song family had already been humiliated enough. Jiang Qiming only took Gu Jinglian's words as a threat. There was no need to take them seriously. Unfortunately, not long after she finished speaking, Song Enya came out of the emergency room. The doctor was still informing her of her injuries, saying that the Missy had suffered a severe concussion, multiple rib fractures, soft tissue damage, and spinal trauma when the Gu family's men arrived at the hospital. The moment the Gus men arrived at the hospital, they split into 2 groups and smashed the front desk without a word. They even threatened to destroy the entire inpatient building if Song Enya and Song Zhenghua were allowed to stay in the hospital. And they did not show any mercy. They were definitely not joking. Gu Jinglian said that the Song family would bear all the losses. The director was in a meeting in the city. When he heard that there was a situation in the hospital, he did not think much of it. It was not until his subordinates said that the hospital was about to be smashed that he rushed back. Chapter 30:16. All he saw were men in black suits surrounding the entrance of the hospital. The huge road was filled with rows of black cars, which made the road extremely congested. There was no traffic. The passers-by were baffled and frightened by the imposing aura at the entrance. The Gu family's behavior and actions still retain the arrogant style of a gangster. In order to achieve their goals, they would do anything and even blow things up. When the hospital director rushed to the hospital, a small leader of the Gu family appeared and pointed at his face, cursing that if the hospital did not chase the Songs out, he would immediately smash the hospital. Call the police? Was there any use in calling the police? Even the police were smashed. Outside the road, the police were maintaining order by the roadside, but they ignored the Gu family. The hospital director had no choice but to run to the intensive care unit and politely ask Jiang Qiming to take them away. Jiang Qiming found it unbelievable. Song Zhenghua and Song Enya were still receiving blood transfusions, and their oxygen tubes were still connected. How could they just pack up and leave? That was too unreasonable. Hence, the Song family and the hospital got into a conflict. In the 10 minutes of this dispute, the Gu family majestically smashed the emergency room again. The emergency room was filled with rescue equipment that cost millions. The hospital director's heart ached so much that his liver twitched. He was the hospital director, but this hospital was not his. Once this loss of millions was caused, it would be his responsibility. Seeing that the Gu family was serious, the hospital did not show any mercy. They practically chased Jiang Qiming out of the hospital. Song Zhenghua and Song Enya were still lying in bed when they were chased out. Song Enya had lost too much blood and was in urgent need of a blood transfusion. Song Jianjun suggested that they go to the hospital in Zhengkou. This hospital was backed by Junku. No matter how powerful Gu Jinglian was, he would not go so far as to smash that hospital. Jiang Qiming was also anxious. In a desperate situation, she tried anything. Hence, Song Jianjun used his connections to call for a car and immediately transferred them to the hospital. By the time they were transferred to the hospital, it was already night. The Gu family did not come looking for trouble. It was so thrilling that Jiang Qiming, who was exhausted and disheveled, fell asleep on the chair in the ward. Song Jianjun was worried that there would be another accident, so he sent someone to guard the hospital and went back. That night was peaceful. Early the next morning, when Gu Jinglian found out that Song Jianjun had arranged for Jiang Qiming to be transferred to this hospital, the Gu family came knocking on his door with great force. Crackle! The entire foyer had been smashed up by the Gu family's people. Jiang Qiming was still drowsy when she heard a nurse running into the ward in a panic. Song Jinghua was in the same ward as Song Enya. She walked over and pulled out the needles for blood and 4 drips without a word. Jiang Qiming still did not know what was going on. When she saw her mother pulling out the needle, she rushed forward anxiously and questioned her why she was doing this. The nurse said angrily, "Someone is smashing up the hospital." It said that the Gu family sent someone here, saying that they want our hospital to chase you out. Otherwise, I'll smash the entire hospital. He dares. This hospital was backed by the central government. How dare he smash it? Did Gu Jinglian eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts? Had the Gu family's power reached such an extent? Impossible. Chapter 30:17. With Song Jianjun's support, Jiang Qiming asked, "Do you know who's lying on this bed?" The nurse glanced at Song Jinghua and said angrily, "I know. It's written on the nameplate, Song Jinghua." "Then, do you know who arranged for us to stay in this hospital? It's Chief Song. Since you know, the hospital has already reported to Chief Song. I did this because Chief Song instructed me to do so," the nurse said confidently. Jiang Qiming was shocked when she heard this. "What? We've already called Chief Song. Chief Song has also approved of this decision." After a pause, the nurse said nervously, "Can you not make things difficult for us? I heard that the hospital you were in yesterday was smashed by the Gu family. They destroyed several million worth of equipment. Everyone in the hospital is saying that you're a jinx. Wherever you go, the Gu family will destroy everything. No hospital will dare to take you in anymore." Jiang Qiming was stunned for a long time. When the nurse continued to pull, she immediately stopped her. "My daughter is still in critical condition. She's still receiving a blood transfusion. You can't pull it out. Chief Song has already spoken. The director can't just stand by and watch the hospital be smashed into a mess because of you. The hospital is a place to save the dying and heal the injured. How can we just stand by and watch people die? You don't understand." However, the nurse was a snob. With the hospital's support, she ignored Jiang Qiming's objections and called over a few male doctors. Together, they pushed the bed out of the hospital. When the Gu family saw that they had been chased out, they immediately retreated. Jiang Qiming was furious. This Gu Jinglian was forcing her into a corner. She called Song Jianjun. On the other end, the latter said helplessly that he had no choice but to send a car to send Song Jinghua and Song Enya home. Jiang Qiming originally thought that this was the end of Gu Jinglian. She did not expect that with Gu Jinglian's character, he would definitely not stop once he was angered to the point of death. This man had always returned kindness 10-fold and enmity 100-fold. If he was displeased, he would return it 100 times, 1,000 times over. As soon as the car arrived at the entrance, Jiang Qiming didn't have time to send Song Yunxian home before she saw cars from the prosecutor's office parked in front of the Song family's gate. Jiang Qiming had met him once before and greeted him at a dinner party. He was Shen Yanfei from the capital's Discipline Inspection Commission. Her mind went blank. She was so frightened that she immediately walked forward and asked, "Chief Shen, what are you, Mrs. Song? I received an anonymous report that Mr. Song was a pervert. We're here to understand the situation." Were they going to raid the Song family? Jiang Qiming laughed in anger and questioned, "Who reported the corruption? Do you have any evidence?" Shen Yanfei gave a fake smile and said coldly, "The informant provided conclusive evidence. Otherwise, we wouldn't have mobilized so many people, don't you think?" His tone was extremely cold, as if he was deliberately drawing a line between himself and the Song family. Here comes another person who is adding insult to injury. But this was the way of the world. Chapter 30:18. Jiang Qiming could not stop them at all. Once Shen Yanfei gave the order, the subordinates around him immediately understood and rushed into the courtyard in a single file. "Shen Yanfei!" Jiang Qiming rushed forward and grabbed his arm, shouting at the top of her lungs, "You can't do this!" Shen Yanfei said in a neutral tone, "Mrs. Song, please open the door and cooperate with our investigation." Jiang Qiming was so angry that her lips trembled. With a livid face, she said, "Jinghua and Enya are seriously injured now. Shen Yanfei, Jinghua used to take care of you so much and supported you in your career. Now you're finally on a meteoric rise. Now that you've turned around, you're going to turn your back on me. Don't forget, who exactly did you rely on to climb to this position? Now that you're in a position, you're going to be ungrateful?" Her every word was a gem, but Shen Yanfei was indifferent. His tone could not help but become harsher. "I asked you to open the door. Why are you talking about these irrelevant things? Indeed, Mayor Song used to support me a lot. But since when did Mayor Song have so much power to promote anyone he wanted?" Jiang Qiming was speechless for a moment. She had dug a hole and jumped into it herself. She was so angry that she did not pay attention to her words. Shen Yanfei looked at her coldly and said expressionlessly, "You're just trying to divert attention and avoid the investigation. Since you're so uncooperative, don't blame us for being rude." With that, he waved his hand and said to his subordinates, "Search the house properly." His subordinates immediately broke through the door. The lock on the sturdy door was broken, and a group of people rushed in. As soon as they walked in, they immediately began to search. Jiang Qiming wanted to rush in, but she was immediately restrained. The Song family's villa was not big, but it was not small either. Jiang Qiming usually did not ask about Song Jinggua's work matters, so she did not know everything about him. However, from what she knew, Song Yunxi had embezzled a portion of the public funds for artificial insemination. This sum of money had been deposited in Song Yunxi's bank account, but it disappeared later. Song Jinghua was very nervous, so he robbed Peter to pay Paul by embezzling another portion of the public funds into this account. Hence, when Song Enya told him that the money had been used to pay for artificial insemination, he nearly had a stroke from anger. Jiang Qiming also remembered that there was a secret door in the basement that Song Jinghua had never allowed her to approach. Once, she walked to the basement and accidentally pushed open the door. When she walked in, she found that it was filled with large safes, and each of them had a combination lock. She vaguely guessed what was inside. She had a tacit understanding with Song Jinghua, but she didn't point it out. She knew very well in her heart how the Song family was able to obtain such wealth. Jiang Qiming had always accepted it with a clear conscience and did not think about the consequences if these things were to be exposed. She could only stand at the door and watch as people kept coming in and out. For a moment, her heart was in a mess. But how could she not know? With accidents happening one after another, she naturally knew who was the one behind this sudden search operation. Gu Jinglian. Him again. Chapter 30:19. Could it be that this man would not rest until he had forced the Song family into a corner? Now, however, Song Jianjun seemed to be deliberately avoiding suspicion and did not care about them. Song Jinghua was lying unconscious in bed, and Song Enya was in danger. Who could she pin her hopes on? There was only utter despair. The search lasted for a full 6 hours. In the evening, the investigation came to an end. She did not know who Shen Yanfei's subordinates were, but they actually dug 3 feet into the ground of the huge villa. His subordinate came to report that they had found a lot of things and had already made a list for him to look through. Shen Yanfei walked into the living room and found a safe and a number of gold bars moved to the center of the empty space. His subordinate reported that the murals on the wall could be moved. When they were moved, they found a secret door. When the secret door was opened, they found the gold bars and cash hidden inside. In the bookcase, some of the books were hollowed out from the center, and there were a few passbooks and bank cards hidden in them. After some investigation, it was found that these accounts added up to hundreds of millions of yuan in savings. Hundreds of millions! The bank's back-end investigation found that the origin of this money was unknown. A portion of it had not been processed, so the bank immediately froze it. All these years, Song Jinghua had been transferring his assets overseas, including several properties he had bought in America. 2 of them were in San Francisco, which were worth millions of dollars, and 3 seaside villas in Florida, which were worth tens of millions. There were also some scattered assets that had yet to be cleared. The court sent people to transfer these assets and put a seal on the villa. Song Jinghua and Song Enya were taken to the hospital by law enforcement officers and detained. Seeing that the situation was not good, Jiang Qiming could not care about Song Enya and Song Jinghua anymore. Taking advantage of the fact that Shen Yanfei was not paying attention, she hurriedly took a taxi and left. She found out the address of the Gu residence and went all the way there. When she reached the door, she frantically knocked on the door, begging to see Gu Jinglian. No one in the Gu family paid her any attention and did not let her in. For the whole night, she knelt in front of the Gu Jinglian's door, begging him for a look. When Uncle Fu came to report, Gu Jinglian was playing Gamoku with Xiao Bao in the study. After what had happened at Song Enya's wedding yesterday, Gu Jinglian had left a good impression on him. He knew that the man was doing this to support him. Hence, when he returned to the Gu residence, the little lad was no longer as cold to him as before. He kept addressing him as uncle, and appeared to be very close to him. Gu Jinglian, on the other hand, was particularly arrogant. He pushed his face away with a look of disdain. Baby Chu, on the other hand, did not mind and continued to circle around Gu Jinglian. He felt that this uncle was pretty good. At least, he took care of him and helped him deal with those bad people who bullied him. He felt that this man was a very reliable backer. He couldn't help but fantasize that if he found his mother and set her up with his uncle, then he would be able to call this uncle Dad. He had a father. In fact, Xiao Bao had already acknowledged this man in his heart. However, he had not changed the way he addressed him because he was afraid that his mother would be angry and unhappy. Still, he did not know if his mother would not acknowledge this man. Chapter 30-20. Gu Jinglian did not know what the child was thinking. He felt awkward calling him uncle, but when he saw that chubby little face, he felt that it was acceptable to call him uncle. Xiao Bao kept pestering him to play Gamoku, but Gu Jinglian did not have the patience to do so. The reason was that Gamoku was too childish. However, during this period of time, the little guy had become obsessed with this game for some reason. It was something that Uncle Fu had taught him. However, when he learned Gamoku, he discovered that this Gamoku was too simple. That was because he played against Uncle Fu. Out of 5 games, Uncle Fu would lose at least 4 games. It was not challenging at all. He kept winning, and the little guy thought that Gamoku was not difficult at all. He believed that he had extraordinary talent in Gamoku and was invincible. Therefore, he wanted to challenge Gu Jinglian. However, after just 1 game, Xiao Bao lost in less than 10 games. What the little guy did not know was that Uncle Fu had been giving in to him all this time. Uncle Fu was very good at Go. Gamoku was child's play to him. However, Gu Jinglian's Go skills were superior to his. Even a high-level national player would not be able to gain an advantage in front of Gu Jinglian, let alone a newbie like Xiao Bao. Gu Jinglian would not give in to him. To him, he had a strong desire to win. Whether it was a game or a competition, he wanted to compete for supremacy in everything. Even if the person playing chess with him was a 5-year-old child, his son, Gu Jinglian would not give in. After 5 games, Xiao Bao did not gain any advantage. He was completely defeated by his father. His little mouth pouted and his nose wrinkled as if he was about to cry. Uncle Fu did not know whether to laugh or cry as he watched from the side. The father and son played chess together. Although Gu Jinglian looked like a mature adult, he was also very childish and willful in certain aspects. Seeing that Xiao Bao was about to cry, Uncle Fu couldn't bear it. He moved closer to Gu Jinglian and whispered in his ear, "Old master, at least give in." Gu Jinglian asked impatiently, "Why should I give in to him? You're already so old, why are you being so calculative with a child? It wasn't easy for Xiaobao to learn Gamoku, but you killed him until he lost all his temper. That's too cruel. Gu Jinglian asked coldly, who's to blame for his stupidity? Uncle Fu cleared his throat and said, Master, this is your son. Gu Jinglian, you gave birth to such a stupid child. Uncle Fu continued to remind him, but if Xiaobao is properly trained, he might become smarter. Xiaobao eavesdropped on them. He put his hands on his hips and said aggrievedly, I'm not stupid. Gu Jinglian frowned and said, do you still want to continue? I'm not playing anymore. Xiaobao pushed the chessboard dejectedly and said unhappily, I'm not playing anymore. This game isn't fun. He was stupid, but he still had the cheek to blame the game for not being fun. Gu Jinglian was disgusted. However, Xiaobao was unwilling to give up. He thought that if he couldn't beat Gu Jinglian in Gamoku, what about the other games? He didn't believe that he couldn't beat him in any game. Xiaobao crossed his arms and thought hard. Suddenly, he thought of something. His eyes lit up and he said to Gu Jinglian, let's play aeroplane chess. I'm not free. Get lost. Gu Jinglian's words were concise and to the point, his gaze cold. Aeroplane chess. He, the head of the Gu family, was actually playing aeroplane chess with a 5-year-old child. Chapter 30:21. When Xiaobao heard this, he said smugly, is it because you know you can't beat me, so you don't dare to play with me? This was clearly a goading tactic. Uncle Fu thought to himself in a cold sweat. Master would definitely not fall for such a goading tactic. However, he saw Gu Jinglian's contemptuous expression. He slammed the table and said, Bullsh**T. You think I can't beat you? Xiaobao immediately said, then I'll bring the chessboard over. Beat me again if you can. Gu Jinglian said coldly, bring it on. Don't cry if you lose. I won't cry. As Xiaobao said this, he immediately went back to his room to bring back the aeroplane chess that Uncle Fu had bought for him. Aeroplane chess was made up of 4 colors. There was a picture of an airplane on it, and it could be played by up to 4 people. There was a die in aeroplane chess. When the die was shaken, the number of heads on the die would determine the number of steps one could take until one reached the end point. However, at the beginning, the plane could only leave the starting point and take off when one rolled a 6. The number of steps one could take to reach the end point had to be exactly right in order to win. It was a chess game that relied heavily on luck. Xiaobao took it over excitedly. He and Gu Jinglian each took a color and started playing. Gu Jinglian familiarized himself with the rules of the game and found it novel. When he saw that it was a dice game, he couldn't bear to see it. Was this little brat sure he wanted to play a dice game with him? Uncle Fu saw this from the side and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Gu Jinglian had spent most of his childhood in casinos. Whenever it involved gambling, whether it was pai gao, mahjong, or especially dice, he could roll as many times as he wanted. Uncle Fu thought that Gu Jinglian would definitely go easy on him. If Xiaobao lost and cried, he wouldn't be able to bear it, right? Who would have thought that Gu Jinglian would take such a small game so seriously? The moment he came up, he threw a 6. Once he threw a 6, he could continue. Gu Jinglian threw 4 6s in a row, and 4 planes took off. When he saw Baby Chu looking like he was about to cry, he casually threw a number. When Xiaobao saw that it was finally his turn, he solemnly fiddled with the dice in his palm for a long time. When it landed on the table, it was a 4. His face was filled with despair. He stared at Gu Jinglian as he threw 2 6s and walked a few steps. He felt strange in his heart. How could he casually throw a 6, but he only took off 1 plane after half a day? Xiaobao was still a little clever. When it was his turn again, he took the dice and began to study it. No matter how he looked at it, there was no problem. He threw the dice again and finally threw a 6. He excitedly took off 1 plane and walked a few more steps. In the next round, Gu Jinglian's plane flew over and sent his plane back to the starting point. Xiaobao looked like he had nothing left to live for. Halfway through the game, he overturned the chessboard and was about to cry. I'm not playing anymore. Gu Jinglian frowned suspiciously. What's wrong? I feel that you're being shameless. Xiaobao said truthfully, why can't you always throw a 6, but I can't? Gu Jinglian said, I can throw as many as I want. You're destined to lose if you play dice with me. You're lying. Xiao Bao did not believe him. Throwing dice depends on luck. I'm not lying to you. Okay, then throw a 4 for me to see. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Jinglian lazily rested his chin on his hand and casually picked up the dice. He spun it on the table and landed with a 4. Chapter 3022. Xiao Bao was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It was unbelievable. It was like magic. Xiao Bao felt that it was amazing, but he was still skeptical. He suddenly reached out and grabbed Gu Jinglian's large hand to examine it carefully. He didn't miss a single pattern, but after a careful examination, he didn't find anything strange. For a moment, his mind was full of question marks. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Xiao Bao said again, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Try throwing another one. Uncle Fu teased him, how many dice do you want this time? What? Gu Jinglian didn't hesitate at all and threw the dice. The dice spun on the table for a long time before finally landing with 1 point facing up. 3. Gu Jinglian threw again and accurately hit 3 points. That's weird. Xiao Bao scratched his head in confusion. He didn't expect Gu Jinglian to do this. That was exactly what he was doing. Xiao Bao suddenly asked curiously, then if you throw 2 dice, can you get the same number? Gu Jinglian said, bring me 2 dice. Uncle Fu immediately rummaged through the cabinets and found 2 dice for him. Together with the one in his hand, there were 3 dice in total. Uncle Fu then brought over a dice cup. Gu Jinglian threw the 3 dice into the cup and pinched the dice cup between his 2 slender fingers. He casually played with the dice cup in his hands and suddenly placed it upside down on the table. His handsome eyebrows raised slightly. Xiao Bao glanced at him and saw that he was motioning for him to open the dice cup. Thus, he curiously reached out his small hand and opened the dice cup. He was surprised to find that all 3 dice were exactly 1 point. He was even more bewildered. Uncle, you're amazing. I'm convinced. Gu Jinglian was flattered by his flattery and felt a little smug. He snorted coldly and said, it's just a small trick. Can you teach me how to play? Xiao Bao clasped his little fists, his eyes full of yearning. He felt that Gu Jinglian's skill was simply too amazing. It was too cool. He could throw as many as he wanted. Could he be one of the legendary mysterious magicians? Gu Jinglian said, why should I teach you? You're so stupid, you won't be able to learn it. I will learn with an open mind. I'll definitely train hard. No matter how difficult it is, I will definitely learn it. Xiao Bao's eyes were filled with admiration, which made Gu Jinglian feel a little better. He even wanted to show off his card skills in front of this little guy, so that this little guy would worship him even more and worship him like a god. Uncle Fu cast a sidelong glance at Gu Jinglian. He was a little disgusted. He didn't expect that old master would have such a childish side. He actually took the little guy seriously. However, this kind of master was a little cute. Uncle Fu was looking at them with gratification. Outside the door, a subordinate came to report that Jiang Qiming was kneeling at the door. They couldn't chase her away and she still had no intention of leaving. Will something happen to her? After all, she's at the Gu family's doorstep. It'll be bad luck if something happens to her. What do you mean? Jiang Qiming is clamoring to see old master. Uncle Fu, do you think we should let old master take a look at her personally? Uncle Fu walked in front of Gu Jinglian and told him about the matter. Gu Jinglian said coldly, do I have to do this personally? If she refuses to leave, break her legs. Chapter 3023. Gu Jinglian pursed his lips impatiently. He then stood up and said to Xiao Bao, be good and wait for me. Xiao Bao watched curiously as Gu Jinglian and Uncle Fu left. Feeling puzzled, he followed behind them. Gu Jinglian and Uncle Fu only realized that it was raining heavily when they reached the door. Jiang Qiming knelt motionlessly at the door. The pouring rain hit her body and soaked her clothes. Her thin clothes stuck to her body, making her look sickly and lifeless. She had not had a good night's sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Moreover, such a huge incident had happened in the Song family. She was utterly defeated. Jiang Qiming heard footsteps and immediately looked up. Once she saw that it was Gu Jinglian, a flattering smile immediately appeared on her face. Young Master Gu, you're finally willing to see me. Gu Jinglian frowned in disgust at her sorry state and said coldly, what are you doing? Young Master Gu, I'm begging you. Please let the Song family off. I don't know what Enya did to offend you. However, if Enya has really offended you in any way, I'll kowtow to you on her behalf and apologize to you since she's still young and immature. But I beg you to let the Song family off. Jinghua is seriously injured and Enya is half dead. Isn't this punishment enough? Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly, don't say such nonsense. Get lost or I'll break your legs. With that, he turned to leave. Jiang Qiming turned pale with fright and immediately pounced on him. She hugged his slender legs and refused to let go. Gu Jinglian's gaze was furious. He turned around and said coldly, let go. Young Master Gu, I'm begging you. The Song family is finished. If this is punishment, then isn't it enough? How are you going to pressure the Song family? Do you really want to force the Song family into a dead end before you stop? Jiang Qiming broke down and cried hysterically, let people off whenever possible, right? Young Master Gu, let the Song family off. Get lost. Gu Jinglian kicked her away. Jiang Qiming flew out like a paper kite with a broken string. She hit the door and fell on the steps. That kick happened to land on her chest. She clutched her chest and coughed pathetically as if she was going to cough her lungs out. Gu said contemptuously, I can let the Song family off, but you have to die. How about that? What? Didn't you say that you wanted to apologize on behalf of your daughter? Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly, then pay with your life. When Jiang Qiming heard this, her eyes widened as she looked at him in disbelief. She could not believe that there was such a cruel man in this world. Gu, don't you go too far. As Jiang Qiming spoke, she suddenly saw a thin figure hiding at the door not far away. Chapter 3024. From now on, we'll stay out of each other's business. If you don't agree, then I'll take this child down with me. Jiang Qiming had obviously chosen to do this because she was in despair. On the way here, she had specially bought a dagger. If Gu Jinglian was determined to kill her, then she didn't mind taking Gu Jinglian down with her. She had originally prepared this dagger for Gu Jinglian. However, when she saw this child, she recognized him at a glance. This was the child that Gu Jinglian held in his arms at the wedding. She realized that Gu Jinglian treated this child differently. Although this child kept calling him uncle, she realized that Gu Jinglian doted on this boy very much. She couldn't help but wonder how this child was related to Gu Jinglian. Could he be an illegitimate child? Gu Jinglian had never married. Many socialites in the capital yearned for Gu Jinglian's young, handsome, and high status. However, they were also wary of Gu Jinglian's unpredictable temperament. There were very few families that were on good terms with the Gu family. Most of them coveted Gu Jinglian's ruthless methods and were in awe of him. However, Gu Jinglian had a woman before. Therefore, Jiang Qiming suspected that this child was Gu Jinglian's illegitimate child. Xiao Bao was quite frightened by this sudden battle. His entire body froze and he didn't dare to move. With the cold dagger pressed against his neck, he didn't even dare to make a sound as he looked at Gu Jinglian anxiously. However, for some reason, even though he was in imminent danger, he still wasn't too nervous. He subconsciously believed that this insufferably arrogant man would never allow him to be in danger. This was probably trust. He believed that this man wouldn't let him be in danger. When Gu Jinglian saw that Xiao Bao had fallen into Jiang Qiming's hands, his eyes finally regained some focus and a trace of nervousness appeared. He reprimanded Uncle Fu and said, "Why is he here?" Uncle Fu was also at a loss. "Old master, I don't know either. This guy probably followed us out of curiosity." Gu Jinglian was a little anxious. This guy always made him worry. The subordinates at the side were also stunned and did not dare to act rashly. They knew very well that this child was not ordinary to Gu Jinglian. They were afraid that Jiang Qiming would really hurt the child, so they stood rooted to the ground and waited for orders. He raged, "Jiang Qiming, don't test my limits. Let him go." Bottom line. So the great young Master Gu also has a bottom line? Jiang Qimeng was even more certain that this child had a special place in his heart. She tightened her grip on the child and glared at him. As long as you let the Song family off, I won't make things difficult for this child. Are you negotiating with me? Gu Jinglian sneered. What right do you have to bargain with me? If you don't want to die a horrible death, let the child go. Uncle Fu was frightened when he heard this. He immediately tugged at Gu Jinglian's sleeve and said gloomily, Old master, this child is still in someone's hands. You've angered Jiang Qimeng by saying these words. Aren't you afraid that she will really die together with Xiao Bao in a fit of anger? She wouldn't dare. Gu Jinglian said fiercely, if she dares to touch a single strand of hair on his head, I'll cut off her flesh piece by piece. Hiss, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No one doubted that Gu Jinglian's words were just a threat. Given his character, if he dared to say such a thing, he would dare to do it. Song Enyo was a classic example. Chapter 30-25. Hence, the little one said to Jiang Qimeng sympathetically, Auntie, can you let me go? Otherwise, you'll really be in trouble. Jiang Qimeng was speechless. Xiao Bao seemed to pity her and said, This uncle not only kills people without batting an eyelid, but his methods are also very terrifying. Don't misunderstand. I have nothing to do with him and I'm not that important to him. Don't take things too hard and use me to threaten him. It's useless. You'll only die a worse death. Uncle Fu was confused. He didn't know how this little one came up with, but he actually managed to scare Jiang Qimeng into a daze. He even managed to make this tense situation disappear. Jiang Qimeng screamed, Shut up. Gu Jinglian said, Jiang Qimeng, do you think you can threaten me with this child? I'll give you 3 seconds to let him go. Gu Jinglian, do you think I'll believe your nonsense again? Else. Gu Jinglian interrupted her. What? You, too. Jiang Qimeng was inexplicably frightened and stumbled backward. Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and counted to 3. There was a bang and a gunshot. A bullet pierced through the air and pierced through her shoulder. Jiang Qimeng was in so much pain that she subconsciously loosened her grip and the dagger fell to the ground. Xiao Bao immediately broke free from her grip and jumped down from her arms. He didn't forget to stomp on her foot before nimbly running toward Gu Jinglian. Behind him, Jiang Qimeng immediately got up, grabbed the dagger on the ground, and stabbed it toward Xiao Bao's back. Uncle Fu was so shocked that he opened his mouth. Before he could exclaim, Gu Jinglian suddenly rushed forward, hugged Xiao Bao in his arms, and threw a clean flying kick. However, Jiang Qimeng held the dagger and fiercely swung it at him. In the blink of an eye, Gu Jinglian kicked Jiang Qimeng's shoulder hard and sent her flying. Gu Jinglian's arm was caught off guard as he was protecting Xiao Bao and was cut by her dagger. Gu Jinglian didn't notice that he was injured, but Xiao Bao's sharp eyes noticed that his clothes were stained with blood and torn. He seemed to be injured. He said fearfully, Uncle, you're injured. He felt guilty and worried at the same time. Uncle Fu rushed over and took the child from Gu Jinglian. He was also shocked when he noticed the abnormality in his arm. Old master, you're injured. Let me take a look. Where are you injured? Gu Jinglian would never put himself in danger easily, but this was the first time in his life that he was injured because of this child. Gu Jinglian pushed him away and turned to look at Jiang Qimeng. He said coldly, You're courting death. After saying that, he walked forward, grabbed her by the throat, and lifted her up. Even though his arm was injured, he was still very strong. Jiang Qimeng's feet were suspended in the air. Her neck was in his hand, and the sound of her joints dislocating kept coming out. She hugged his arm tightly and kicked her legs. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her entire face was flushed red. She was almost suffocating. No. Don't kill. Jiang Qimeng said a few words with difficulty, her eyes filled with pain and despair. Gu Jinglian was indifferent and tightened his grip on her throat. Xiao Bao saw this scene and was frightened. He immediately said, Uncle, stop. Chapter 30-26. As Xiao Bao spoke, he glanced at Jiang Qimeng, who was lying on the ground in a sorry state. He could not bear to see her like this. She looks so pitiful. Furthermore, if you kill someone, it will only dirty your hands. Gu Jinglian frowned. He could not help but wonder if this little guy was his biological son. Why was he so soft-hearted? Had he forgotten that it was this pitiful woman who had used her dirty hand to strangle his neck and even pressed a dagger against his neck? Uncle Fu also said, "Old master, don't dirty your hands. Leave this kind of person to me." Then he whispered into Gu Jinglian's ear, "You have to be more careful in front of the child. Otherwise, you will scare the child. Xiao Bao is only 5 years old." Gu Jinglian felt that it made sense. He nodded slightly and said, "I'll leave it to you." Uncle Fu nodded. Gu Jinglian carried Xiao Bao and returned to the room. After the thrilling scene just now, the two of them were in a sorry state. They were drenched from head to toe. Just as Gu Jinglian returned to the room, Xiao Bao hurriedly left his arms and started rummaging through the cabinets. "What are you looking for?" Xiao Bao could not be bothered to speak. Finally, he found a first aid kit in the cabinet. He was observant. A few days ago, Uncle Fu had accidentally injured his finger and used a band-aid, so he put the first aid kit here. He carried the first aid kit to Gu Jinglian and said carefully, "Uncle, your arm is injured. Let me help you apply the medicine." Gu Jinglian looked at him suspiciously. Why was this guy trying to curry favor for no reason? He said, "There's no need. I can do it myself." "You can't bandage it as well as I can," Xiao Bao said as he pushed him to sit on the sofa. He emphasized, "You just have to sit down. Leave the rest to me." Gu Jinglian looked at him with disdain and questioned, "Can you do it?" "Of course. Mother often gets injured, so I'm the one who takes care of her wounds. Uncle, you have to believe in my ability." As he spoke, Xiao Bao rolled up Gu Jinglian's sleeve. There was a knife wound on his arm. Fortunately, the wound was not deep and did not even require stitches. He only needed to clean the wound and bandage it to stop the bleeding. Gu Jinglian simply leaned against the sofa and closed his eyes, leaving the little guy to his own devices. Xiao Bao opened the first aid kit and rolled up his sleeves. Then, he used a pair of tweezers to carefully pick up an alcohol swab and wanted to apply it to his wound. Unexpectedly, his hand was too small, and the tweezers were a little too big. Unexpectedly, the alcohol cotton was not clamped, and the sharp tip of the tweezers poked the wound. Gu Jinglian. He abruptly opened his eyes and glared fiercely at little treasure. What's going on? Even if it was alcohol, it shouldn't be so painful. Xiao Bao felt a little guilty and retracted the tweezers. Fortunately, Gu Jinglian did not see it. He laughed and said, "Uncle, so you're afraid of pain too?" Gu Jinglian's lips twitched and he snorted coldly. "How is that possible?" He frowned and was suspicious again. "If you don't know how to do it, I'll do it myself." I didn't do well just now. It's all your fault for moving around." Gu Jinglian? His face was full of question marks. When did he move around? This kid was blaming others for his own incompetence. Chapter 3027. Gu Jinglian tolerated it and was rather patient. Xiao Bao was more attentive this time. He carefully cleaned his wound, then applied some medicine and bandaged it with gauze. "It's done." Xiao Bao was elated. Gu Jinglian opened his eyes and saw that his arm was wrapped very thickly with gauze. After that he even tied a bow. It was very girlish. Such a thick bandage made people think that his arm was broken. Gu Jinglian's face was ashen. "Is this what you mean by having enough experience? Is there a problem?" Gu Jinglian said coldly, "I only scratched the skin. My bones are not broken. I was afraid that your wound would hurt if it hit something hard, like the corner of a table. It won't hurt if the bandage is thicker." Xiao Bao explained very considerately. Gu Jinglian was speechless again. When Uncle Fu walked in and saw Gu Jinglian's arm wrapped like a dumpling, his face immediately changed colors. He shriveled for a long time and then laughed loudly without giving face. "Old master, is your arm broken?" "No." Gu Jinglian was even angrier. "If you laugh again, I'll pull out your tongue." "Oh." Uncle Fu was so frightened that he quickly covered his mouth and stopped laughing. Xiao Bao was a little frustrated. His little face wrinkled and he asked sadly, "Is my bandage that ugly?" What do you think?" Gu Jinglian kicked his butt. "Go to sleep." A dog biting a green bean cake. You don't know how to be kind. Xiao Bao muttered as he went back to his room. Gu Jinglian and Uncle Fu looked at each other and suddenly asked tacitly, "What's a green bean cake?" Uncle Fu asked, "Old master, do you need me to bandage it again?" "No need." Gu Jinglian said awkwardly, "It's troublesome." With that he got up and returned to his room. Uncle Fu snickered behind his back. This old master really didn't mean what he said. How was it that he was afraid of trouble? It was that he couldn't bear to tear it down. Even though he disliked it, it was still his own son who had bandaged his wound. The next day, the news reported the news of Song Jinggua's downfall. The disciplinary committee found a lot of cash and gold bars of unknown origin in the Song residence. They even found out that Song Jingua had bought overseas. In addition, Song Yunxi was also taken away for investigation. It was said that Song Jianjun was spared because he was the one who exposed Song Jinggua's other hidden assets. This was clearly an act of abandoning the pawn to save the general, to save one's own life. Once this news was announced, the whole city was shocked. Song Jingua was the mayor of Beijing. In front of the public, he had always presented himself as a clean and honest man. However, no one would have thought that he had embezzled such a large amount of gray assets. After the final liquidation by the disciplinary commission, the total amount was more than 1 billion. Among them, there was also Song Jinggua's unknown investment funds. In addition, Jiang Qimeng was also taken away for investigation. This matter caused a huge uproar and even alarmed the higher-ups. Song Jinggua caused a series of butterfly effects. It was said that following his connections, other people were also uprooted. Beijing's government experienced a big reshuffle overnight. Another report also caught the attention of the public. Chapter 3028. It was rumored that the Song family had offended the Gu family, and that the Gu family was the one behind all this. However, there were also people who said that the Gu family had only collected relevant evidence. If Song Jinggua had not done such a thing, the Gu family would not have made up something out of nothing to deal with the Song family. Song Jinggua's case was still under investigation, and his assets had been seized. As for his trial, it would be held in public at another date. Song Jinggua could never have imagined that because of his daughter, his career would come to an end like this. He had failed miserably. What he didn't expect even more was that what awaited him was a death sentence with a reprieve. Of course, this was all in the future. During this period of time, Chu Ho had been actively rehabilitating. Under Uncle Fu's meticulous care, her body was getting better, and her complexion had returned to normal. Hence, when she asked to see Xiao Bao again, Uncle Fu did not refuse. In the afternoon, when Xiao Bao came home from kindergarten, Uncle Fu hugged him and said mysteriously, "Xiao Bao, Uncle Fu will take you to see someone, okay?" Xiao Bao was curious. "Who is it?" "Don't worry, you'll know when you see him later." Uncle Fu carried Xiao Bao and walked into Chu Ho's room. When he opened the door, Xiao Bao was still confused. However, when he followed Uncle Fu's line of sight and saw Chu Ho standing in the room, wearing a white shirt and looking uneasy, he was stunned. He was so shocked that he could not speak. Chu Ho was originally calm as she waited anxiously. When Uncle Fu said that he would bring Xiao Bao over, she waited patiently in the room. She was afraid that her reunion with Xiao Bao would be obstructed by Gu Jinglian. However, she did not expect that Gu Jinglian would not interfere, which surprised her. When she saw Xiao Bao, Chu Ho's eyes reddened. A warm smile immediately appeared on her originally stern face. She immediately walked over and held Xiao Bao's face, looking left and right. Originally, Xiao Bao was very thin, not tall, and there was not much flesh on his face. However, how long had it been? His face had become chubby, and he had grown a lot taller. Chu Ho suddenly had mixed feelings. She hugged him tightly, her eyelashes wet with tears. "Xiao Bao." Chu Ho's throat was choked and her voice was a little hoarse. Xiao Bao reacted belatedly. When he first saw her, he thought that he was dreaming. It was only when Chu Ho hugged him tightly and felt the real touch and the warmth of her body that he realized that this was not a dream. This was really happening. Finally, he was reunited with her. His mother was alive and kicking. His mother really existed in reality, and not in a dream. No matter how hard he tried, he could not catch up with her. Xiao Bao was so emotional that he burst into tears. He cried and hugged Chu Ho, crying until the sky fell and the earth cracked. Xiao Bao thought that he would never see Mom again in this lifetime. Sob, sob, sob. Xiao Bao cried sadly, and Chu Ho's heart ached even more. She took him from Uncle Fu's arms and hugged him, kissing his forehead repeatedly. Mom missed you too. Sob, sob. Mom, why did you only find Xiao Bao now? Xiao Bao felt wronged and disdainful. Mom is so stupid. So stupid, so stupid. When Uncle Fu saw this scene, he couldn't help but be moved. The corners of his eyes were a little wet, and he felt a little touched. Chapter 30:29. Even though Xiao Bao rarely mentioned Chu Ho during this period of time, he knew that the little guy was meticulous. Even though he didn't say it out loud, he was always thinking about Chu Ho in his heart. Hence, he was happy to nurse Chu Ho back to health. He hoped that she could recover quickly so that she could appear in front of the little guy in good health. It would be a surprise for the little guy. To Xiao Bao, this surprise was both surprising and delightful. He could tell that when he saw Chu Ho, he was so emotional that he almost fainted from crying. Uncle Fu was considerate. He quietly left the room and closed the door, giving the mother and son some space. Chu Ho wiped away Xiao Bao's tears and said, "Don't cry, okay? Didn't Mommy find you?" Xiao Bao was still a little angry. However, he couldn't hold it in for long. In the blink of an eye, he smiled warmly again. Chu Ho pinched his face affectionately and said to him, "Xiao Bao, Mommy will take you away from here, okay?" When Xiao Bao heard this, he was startled. He didn't immediately nod in agreement. Instead, he grabbed her collar uneasily and said hesitantly, "Mommy? Xiao Bao has a question to ask you." Chu Ho paused for a moment and said, "Okay, go ahead." She vaguely realized that what he was going to ask might be a tricky question. Xiao Bao asked Mommy before where Daddy was, but Mommy said that the grass on Daddy's grave was taller than me. But Xiao Bao found Daddy. Xiao Bao blushed and said, "Mommy said that before." Was she lying to Xiao Bao? Chu Ho held her breath and didn't answer immediately, because she didn't know how to answer this question. Xiao Bao asked doubtfully, "Mommy, Xiao Bao has a daddy, right? His name is Gu Jinglian, right?" Xiao Bao, must Mommy leave? When Xiao Bao thought about leaving with her, he was afraid that he would never see that handsome and bad uncle again, and his mood became inexplicably complicated. Thus, he probed carefully, "Can't Mom stay?" With his father, Xiao Bao would have a mother and a father. Mommy won't be alone anymore. Chu Ho did not expect him to make such a request. For a moment, he did not know how to respond. "Xiao Bao, don't you like Mommy anymore?" "I do. Xiao Bao loves Mommy the most." Just as Xiao Bao finished speaking, he hesitated for a moment. He changed the topic and said softly, "But Xiao Bao likes Uncle too. Although that uncle looks fierce like a big iceberg and doesn't seem easy to get close to, Xiao Bao can feel that he likes Xiao Bao too and treats Xiao Bao very well. A few days ago, Uncle even taught me a lesson." Bad guys? Baby Chu immediately told her everything that had happened after he was kidnapped by the two men sent by Xianxia, including his encounter with Gu Jinglian, as well as what had happened in the Gu family during this period of time. He told her everything, big and small. Chu Ho was a little stunned when she heard this. Although she was confused and couldn't make heads or tails of it, there was one thing that Xiao Bao emphasized. Gu Jinglian treated him very well. Although he would sometimes threaten him with scary words like, "I'll break your legs," Xiao Bao could see how much he doted on him. Chapter 30:30. Quote, "At the end of the day, blood ties are a very strange thing. It could bind two people together tightly, and it was the most intimate bond. But it can also mercilessly create an insurmountable gap between them. When I was young, I used to be glad that I had a brother like Dongyu who doted on me. I used to think that I was the happiest girl in the world. When I grew up, I hated that the man I loved so much that I couldn't extricate myself from had the same blood flowing in his veins, along the way, along the way, along the way, along the way, along the way. From ignorant feelings to immature feelings, to a strong desire to be together forever, until we were forcibly separated by the world. How far is forever? In a single thought, eternity is eternal. One wrong thought, and every step will lead to death. Don't you? Do you know that even though the world is so big, I have nowhere to go and no one to rely on? Whether it's God or anyone else, who can explain to me what love is? If no one can explain it clearly, then why can't I fall in love with Dongyu? This is a question that I still can't solve after leaving home for so long. For so many years, I've been searching for a balance between love and Dongyu, until I received the sudden news of my marriage. Xiaochuan, let me tell you a piece of good news. Your brother is getting married. When are you coming back for a gathering? Over the phone, my father's voice sounded weathered and uneasy. He chose his words carefully. Come home. Everyone misses you. Your mother and I, and your brother. Everyone misses you. At that moment, my breathing stopped. It was really like a boom. My mind went blank and there was nothing left. This news, which made the whole family immerse in joy, suddenly threw me into eternal hell. Holding the receiver tightly, I was silent for a long time. Then, I tried my best to suppress my trembling voice and said calmly, okay. After hanging up the call, I realized that the back of my hand was already sweaty. Father said, come home. But that was home, and yet it wasn't home. I never thought that reality would be so cruel. It was so cruel that one look at heaven and one look at hell. I used to think of him as my entire world, but I didn't expect this warm world to suddenly collapse like a cloud. And it came so suddenly, the next day, I booked a flight back to China. I knew that returning home this time was definitely not a wise choice. After drifting alone in a foreign country for a few years, I waited for such news. I thought that even if I had given up, I should be more thorough. Let me see him with my own eyes. If he is really happy, then I should try to let go of this unforgettable relationship. The moment I got off the plane, I felt a lump in my throat. Looking at the crowd in front of me, I felt a stabbing pain in my heart and tears welled up in my eyes. I walked through the crowd with great difficulty, but my footsteps were very slow. Every step I took, I would stop, and from time to time, I would brush past strangers. I still remember that 8 years ago, when I left this city with a heart filled with despair, it was the same scene. These people passed by my world. I don't know their stories, and they don't understand my thoughts. Chapter 30-31. Now that I've set foot on this land again, the city seems to have changed a lot. The airport has been rebuilt, the interior decoration is new, and it looks very stylish. The thick Beijing accent of my hometown filled my ears. It's been a long time since I last heard it, and at the same time, I feel very warm in my heart. I'm back. After 8 years, I'm stepping on this land again. But in my heart, there's a bit of nervousness, but more, there's a deep sadness in my heart. When I left back then, I felt that the future was unfamiliar. But now that I've set foot on this land, I don't feel close. There's a sense of timidity when I'm close to home. Mother has been waiting at the airport for a long time, and she arrived early. She must have specially dressed up after knowing that I'm coming back. After 8 years, when the mother and daughter met again, they didn't hug each other warmly like normal people. They just stood there quietly and looked at each other. There was estrangement in their eyes. I think she must have sadly discovered a flash of indifference in my eyes. From her face, it's not hard to see how much she wants to go forward and hug me tightly. She wants to tell me how much she missed me in the past 8 years as a mother. How she wanted to tell me how worried my family had been about me since I had been away for so long. Maybe she regretted what she did 8 years ago. I thought. But all the words are stuck in my throat under my cold gaze. There are thousands of words, but I can't open my mouth. Mom, I'm back. Amidst the noise, I smiled and broke the awkward silence between us. Mother came back to her senses and forced a smile. She chuckled and muttered, "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." Then she felt a bit awkward. As if to ease the awkwardness, she hurried forward to help me carry my luggage. Out of the corner of my eye, I instinctively dodged her hand. My mother was in a daze, and her hand froze in midair. "Mom, I'll do it myself." As I said that, there was no change in my expression. I knew that my cold gaze must have made my mother's heart ache a little, because I saw a flash of pain on her face. I suddenly realized that these 8 years, which was neither a long nor short period of time, seemed to be like a great flood that washed away the dependence and connection between mother and daughter. Xiachuan, do you still hate me? 8 years ago? I had no choice but to send you out of the country. I'm doing this for your own good. A smile appeared on my face, but I said nothing. After a long while I sighed. I know, so you really don't have to explain so much. She gave me another long look. Xiachuan, is the luggage heavy? Let Mom do it for you. Her mother's voice was very soft and even trembled slightly. She said carefully, let me carry it for you. Xiachuan, I'll carry your luggage for you, okay? I was stunned. When I looked up, I saw her frowning slightly. She seemed a little humble now. It was a world of difference from when she had arrogantly chased me out of the country. I pursed my lips and nodded silently, allowing my mother to take the luggage from me. Chapter 30-32. This time, I didn't avoid it. There was some comfort in my mother's eyes. The city has changed a lot in the years you've been away. Our family has moved too. The piece of land we used to live in has been taken over by the government. When he heard that you were coming back, your father was overjoyed. He didn't sleep well last night. He tossed and turned nervously. He kept saying that he was waiting for you to come back today so that he could cook for you. Look, he bought fresh vegetables early in the morning. He's probably still busy at home. Sitting in the taxi, Mother Lan smiled and chattered. Gradually, she let go of her worries. I smiled but didn't say anything. My gaze was indifferent through the car window. It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. As my mother spoke, in the rearview mirror, the corners of her eyes couldn't help but moisten. However, she secretly wiped away the tears with her fingertips, not wanting me to see. Mom. I silently looked out the window at the unfamiliar street. My eyelids drooped slightly as I interrupted her indifferently. I asked hesitantly, is he all right? She knew who I was talking about. Hence, she fell silent and the smile on her face gradually faded. He has always been thinking about you. I vaguely remember that not long after I was born, the first word I could say was brother. The first name I said when I was learning to speak was also his name. Dongyu. For as long as I could remember, the thing that left the deepest impression on me wasn't my mother's gentle whispers, nor my father's broad shoulders, but his warm arms. My name was Xiachuan. I was born on the hottest day of summer. His name was Dongyu. He was born during the coldest time of winter. He was my brother, 3 years older than me. When I was young, my parents were busy with work and the family of 4 rarely spent time together. When I was born, my mother's heart ached for me and she insisted on giving birth to me. In order to avoid the policy, she fled to the countryside. At that time, the 2 of us were fostered at my grandmother's house in the countryside, and Dongyu was my greatest support. Dongyu was very good-looking. He had inherited his mother's good looks. He had delicate features and was very handsome, especially his pair of clear black and white eyes. One look at them could make people lose their souls. Hence, many girls had liked Dongyu since he was young. However, perhaps because he was born in winter, Dongyu's personality was a little cold. He had been too distant from the other children since he was young. Even his parents were a little distant from him. This coldness was even more obvious during the rebellious period of his youth. And from the beginning to the end, the only one who could freely get close to him was probably me. Perhaps it was because we were blood-related, but Dongyu doted on me to the bone. Even his parents couldn't compare to this kind of love. According to Grandma, when I was born, Dongyu was still very young. He had thin arms and legs, and there wasn't a single ounce of flesh on his arms. However, he was able to carry me steadily and never fell or knocked my head. At that time, after my mother gave birth, she wasn't in good health. Before I was a month old, she asked Grandma to take care of me. Dongyu, on the other hand, followed her silently. He had never been close to anyone since he was young, but he liked to hug me and play with me, calling my nickname over and over again. Chun. When I cried, he patiently teased me. When I was hungry, he gently coaxed me. At night, it was Dongyu who hugged me and sang nursery rhymes to sleep. Chapter 30-33. Yes, he really doted on me. I naively thought that even if Dongyu was the only person in the world who doted on me, I would still be the happiest girl in the world. I remembered Grandma mentioning that when I was 1 year old, Dongyu held my little hand and taught me how to walk step by step. He was half squatting in front of me. At that time, I was chubby from being raised by Grandma. I wore a lot of winter clothes and struggled to walk on my wobbly legs, wobbling towards him with my arms outstretched. In a moment of carelessness, I fell hard. Although it wasn't serious, a layer of skin was abraded on my palm. Before I could cry out loud, Dongyu's eyes turned red. He hugged me in a panic. For the first time in my life, I showed an expression other than gentleness and indifference on his face. As I grew older, I could run more steadily and gradually became sturdier. I played with the other children, playing hide and seek and catching cicadas. I was really crazy. When I was young, I loved the nighttime the most. At that time, we were still young and there were no inhibitions. Every night, Grandma would bathe Dongyu. When I was young, I didn't know what shame was. I would climb into the bathtub on all fours and squeeze with him. I especially liked to tease him. I even pointed at Dongyu's undeveloped little guy and asked Grandma why my brother's part was different from mine. Grandma would always laugh at my teasing. She would scratch the bridge of my nose and laugh at me for being shameless. On the contrary, Dongyu would be a little shy. So much so that when I was naked next to him, he would freeze and not dare to move. Grandma would apply the shower gel on us. I liked the refreshing smell very much, and I liked the fact that my body smelled the same as Dongyu's. I was afraid of the dark and didn't like to sleep with Grandma, but I was willing to squeeze into a small bed with Dongyu. At night, I would often wrap my little arms and legs around him without restraint, pestering him to play rock, paper, scissors. This boring game became the most interesting pastime. When the moon was high in the sky, I couldn't sleep. I liked to lie beside him, hold my little head, and listen to him sing and tell stories. Dongyu's voice was very pleasant. It was as clear as a wind chime, with a hint of childishness. He sang gently in my ear. At that time, he only knew how to sing a few songs that he had learned from music class. But I never got tired of listening to him. Every night in my childhood, I always fell asleep with his soft singing. In her memories of her youth, Dongyu was somewhat bland. He always locked himself in that world, either doing his homework or reading some famous works outside of class. He had been taking piano lessons since he was 6, so I often pestered him to teach me. At that time, in the eyes of many children, Dongyu was cold and unapproachable. He was so noble and aloof. Thinking of his background from the city, he was not like these wild children who grew up playing mud and catching frogs in the countryside. His body was clean, and there was a bit of scholarly elegance. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary child could have. Good etiquette and refined speech were used by many parents as teaching materials for their children. Chapter 30-34. It's delicious. I'm asking my daughter. Xianxia had the urge to roll her eyes. Unknowingly, it was getting closer and closer to her due date. Xianxia's tummy was getting bigger and bigger. Perhaps big wasn't enough to describe her round tummy. In Yu's words, Xianxia's tummy seemed to be hiding a ball. Xianxia innocently fantasized, will there be 2 little sisters? Xianxia broke out in cold sweat when she heard this. Yu nodded in agreement. He explained, our family has the genes of twins. Look, Mommy and Uncle are twins and they gave birth to us. If that's the case, we might even have twins. Xianxia clapped happily. That's great. If that's the case, maybe Mommy has 2 little sisters in her tummy. This way, you can have one and I can have one. We won't have to fight for it. Xianxia laughed when she heard this. You guys are treating your little sisters like toys. Yu and Xianxia chuckled. Xianxia couldn't help but pour cold water on them. You guys can give up. There's only 1 little sister in my tummy. That's what the ultrasound doctor said. So, don't harbor any fantasies that you shouldn't have. Sob. The 2 little lads wanted to cry but had no tears. In the 9th month of her pregnancy, Xianxia also suffered a lot. At night, she couldn't sleep so well. Because of her lack of appetite, she couldn't eat much for dinner. Wuxia would coax her to eat some fruits, but at night, she would be hungry again. She would wake up from hunger, but she wouldn't have any appetite. Sometimes, she wouldn't wake up from hunger, but she would be awakened by cramps in her legs. Her legs were a little swollen, and she couldn't walk properly. Sometimes, when she was lying on the bed, Wuxia would massage her legs. It wasn't too hard, but it was enough to relieve her pain. She felt extremely guilty. After all, as the president, managing such a large company was not an easy job. Every day, he rushed to the company early in the morning. After dealing with the affairs, he rushed back. He also had to go for regular prenatal checkups and learn how to take care of children. He was so busy. For her, he was worried sick. She couldn't see, but she could feel it. Compared to the first time she was pregnant, having this man around made her feel that being pregnant was a very happy thing. Gradually, she began to feel sleepy and lazy. She did not like to go for walks anymore. However, Wuxia kept a close eye on her. It was inevitable that she would take a walk after dinner every day. The doctor speculated that the due date would be in mid-November. As the due date approached, Wuxia could not help but start to feel nervous. After waiting for so long, they had finally entered the due date without incident. The next 20 days were naturally not to be taken lightly. He took care of her even more carefully. When there were still more than 10 days before the due date, he booked a special ward in the obstetrics and gynecology hospital and arranged for her to enter. When Gong Jie found out that Xianxia's due date was approaching, he finished his work and rushed over. He accompanied her in the hospital every day, looking forward to the arrival of the little princess. However, just as the due date was approaching, a small accident happened. On this day, Wuxia was at the shareholders' meeting. Minyu received a call from the hospital saying that Xianxia's water broke. Her water broke. Chapter 30-35. Wuxia was confused. There were still a few days before the due date, and the doctor said that it wouldn't be brought forward. Only then did he feel at ease and go back to the company to handle his work. But now, someone called to say that the amniotic fluid had broken early. How could it have broken early? He left the company and drove all the way to the hospital. He arrived at the hospital anxiously. Just as he reached the entrance of the delivery room, he happened to see a few doctors walking out. He rushed forward and grabbed the doctor's collar, asking, "Where is she? Has she given birth?" "Chairman Mu, calm down. How can she give birth so soon?" He turned around and realized that there was already a group of people waiting at the door. Gong Jie, Hua Jin, and Xiao Shui had also rushed over when they received the news. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen stood at the side with a guilty look on their faces, as if they were very guilty. There wasn't enough time to inform the others, and Hua Jin was afraid that it would be inconvenient to have too many people around, so he didn't announce it. The group of people discussed nervously at the entrance of the delivery room. They were worried but also looking forward to it. Wuxia couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. He questioned the doctor, "Isn't the due date not here yet? Why did the amniotic fluid break early?" The doctor's lips twitched. He thought to himself, "You have to ask your wife about this." It turned out that Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were afraid that Xianxia would be too bored, so they turned on the television and switched to a talk show. Just listening to a talk show could relieve one's boredom. However, this episode of the talk show was too funny. Xianxia listened with great interest. When she heard a joke, she laughed a little too hard and actually broke her amniotic fluid. When the amniotic fluid broke, Gong Jie was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand what was going on. He hurriedly found the doctor, who explained that the amniotic fluid had broken early. Hence, Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen shrank to the side guiltily. Her amniotic fluid had broken, so she could only hurry up and induce labor. Fortunately, the due date was not far away. It was not a big deal, but she had to induce labor. The doctor pushed Xianxia into the waiting room. She had just been induced to give birth and did an internal examination. Xianxia was in so much pain that she wanted to die. The internal examination was quite painful. Xianxia had experienced it once before, but after a few years, she had almost forgotten it. Now that she was going through it again, she immediately regretted it. According to Hua Jin's description, her howls during the internal examination were incomparable to those of a pig being slaughtered. It was said that a woman's temper was at its worst when she was about to give birth. Xianxia pointed at him and complained, "Hua Jin, how dare you gloat over my misfortune? How dare you say that my cry is like slaughtering a pig? Wait till I give birth, I won't let you off." The doctor gave her another dose of medicine and said that the cervix had only been dilated by 2 fingers. She had to wait until the cervix was dilated by 10 fingers before she could be officially pushed into the delivery room. As for the internal examination, the doctor used his finger to check the cervix's opening. After the internal examination, Xianxia heard a mother-to-be screaming in the delivery room next door. "I want a cesarean section. I want a cesarean section. I don't want a natural birth." Xianxia shuddered when she heard it. Although it was not the first time, when she thought about the pain during labor again, she felt a sense of bleakness like a warrior cutting off his wrist. Just as she was feeling uneasy, another pregnant woman was pushed into the waiting room. She was in so much pain that she kept changing her position. One moment she was kneeling, standing, lying down, and wailing. When Xianxia thought about how unbearable the next 10 hours would be, she became even more disheartened. The whole world seemed to have turned dark.